Jen and I did the shopping, and we took a
repent all
vote.
the
Hi,
time.
good morning. Today is, December 20th, 2018. We're about to begin our work session. Also, this is our last meeting, before the holidays, so just wanted to wish everybody happy holidays and Merry Christmas and, a Happy New Year. So we're gonna begin today's work session. We have our County Legislator Al Krupski here. At our last meeting, we were talking about, possible the pledge, sorry. All right, let's stand for the pledge. Al, do you wanna lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, restart. So we have our legislator Al Krupski here to talk about, our last work session, we were talking about, acquiring some property, over on West Main Street, we formerly known as the Sims property. So there were some questions that everybody had some concerns about, and so, Al has come here to explain to us some procedures and maybe answer some questions. So I will turn it over to you.
Thanks for having me, appreciate it. So I'll try not to go on too long, 'cause it's your last meeting and you know what that is.
You have a lot of,
You're
you have a lot of
Tuesday,
meetings
right?
left
Yeah,
after,
yeah.
you,
Just
right?
speak
Went
up
on
a little
too
bit,
long.
Al, the
Gotta-
microphone is,
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, okay. So the applicant here came in, the landowner, and he expressed interest in selling his property. To keep it short, someone approaches, our office, or they approach Suffolk County Planning, and they said they'd like to sell their property, fee title or farmland development rights, one or the other. And then they have to sign a letter saying that they're willing to go through that process. And then it goes through, kind of an appraisal process where the county sends it out, so we have to approve, as a committee. I sit on the Environment Planning and Agriculture Committee, so we have to approve an appraisal process, and it goes out to two, appraisers. I sit on the ETRB, so then we sit in its executive session and you review, with the county appraisers, review the appraisals. And they base it on, and they actually a lot of times call the towns that they're in, say, what can be done here? This guy says you can do this, what can they actually do? So they do a very good job about actual current value, and then they look for different comps. Quite often the appraisals are different, the county appraiser takes a look at it. We sit down with the county appraiser at ETRB, and then we kind of approve. And sometimes it doesn't always go smoothly, and sometimes we table it, and then the county appraisers go back and they talk to the appraisers who did it, and sometimes they readjust things. Most of the time, it's pretty consistent, and then we approve the value there. It goes back to the EPA committee, and then we go into executive session, we look at the money that we have, whether to make the offer or not, based on the value, and based on all the other parcels that are available for preservation. And then, once the committee makes that motion to make an offer, then it goes to the full legislature to make the offer. So there's a long, that's why preservation takes years, because there's a long, drawn-out process of different steps that take place. So when this parcel came in, I wasn't familiar with it, so we went down to take a look at it, and I'm sure you've gotten the letters from the director of the Conic Estuary Program. And so we took a look at the site, and it's a very heavily impacted site. It was an old duck farm, so it's by the road, it's all sand, and it's high ground by the road, and then you go down by the river, and it's Phragmites, and there's a lot of mugwort, and there's a lot of that Japanese knotweed on one side, but it's adjacent to some nice preserved land on the river. So, and that makes it pretty compelling to have that kind of block of preserved land. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, and he goes out scalloping, and this is another pretty good year. It's still December, and they're still getting scallops out there, and there's a lot of bugs too for next year. So next year's harvest is really good. And to make a long story short, anytime you can keep development off of the river, because everything that's going to flow downhill is going to go into the river, it's going to go into the bay, and it's going to affect all those things. You look at the water quality in the bay, you look at all the people are trying to raise oysters, all the oyster growers. It's important.
Are they actually planting oysters in this part of the river?
No, but the river flows into the bay, so anything that flows off of that property is gonna end up and affect water quality in Peconic Bay, and it's,
Right.
you know, there's an industry that's growing, you know, and Suffolk County runs the leasing program, and there's also private leases that people are growing oysters. So you've got this wild harvest of scallops, you've got, you know, the water quality is so important for the shellfish, growers, and it's important for all the marinas and everything,
Right.
you know, so it's critical. If somebody comes in with a piece of property, 16 acres on the river, and they wanna preserve it, it's really critical should try to make an effort. You make an offer. A lot of times, we make an offer, and, people say, it doesn't meet their expectations, and they choose not to preserve it at that time. So it's not like because he came in the door, this parcel is gonna be preserved. There's a whole process, and at the end of it, it's a voluntary program, and the applicant or the landowner could say, no, thanks, I'm not gonna do that, because it's not, I have other options, and I'm not ready to explore that. And we did change it so people can't kick the tires, so we can't come in like the next month and get another appraisal, you know, like a free appraisal. I think it's a year or two before he can get another appraisal from the county. But it's still, so it's never preserved till it's actually preserved.
Signed on.
Right.
So, in my tenure on the town board, every single time a civic group or a property owner has come to you and said, we're interested in you preserving this piece of property, you've always come to the town board ahead of time and said, can you give us a resolution, can you give us a letter in support, is this on the town's priority list, is this, you know, property in threat of being developed, and things of that nature. And that didn't happen here, so I'm just curious as to why.
I'm not sure if that happened, there's one by the, historical, museum there.
Yeah, right
Yes.
across the street, that
I'm not
little
sure if that
parcel.
would happen there either.
When was that preserved?
2 years ago. 2 years ago, we just, and,
I think,
I don't know if we talked to the town first,
You
or
talked
whether
to
we
open
just,
space about that.
Yeah.
did we, or we just jumped right in?
No, you
Because
came into us.
one of the concerns here, I gotta tell you, and when I started as a legislator, you know, almost 7 years ago, one of the concerns was there's a parcel of land that was preserved by the county on Flanders Road, and I don't know if you're familiar with that piece, right next to McDonald's.
okay,
And when I started, somebody came in the office right away and they said, we'd like to put in a ramp there and use it as waterfront access. It's a big parcel. There's no parking. You need a path to the water. You put in any kind of boat, small boat or kayak or canoe, whatever. It was preserved with passive money. There's different pots of money. And because of the way it was preserved, there was no language in there for, there was no provision for parking or access or trail or anything. And so as a result, there's a beautiful parcel on the river that can't be accessed by the public, unless you're gonna park on the side of the road and
Is
bushes
that,
back to it.
is that 30 acres? Is that 30 acres?
I'm not sure if it's 30, it might be a little smaller than that, but it's right across from the parking lot on Main Street, and it's right next to McDonald's, they're going to the east.
Yeah, I don't
and
think
it's
it's
probably
30
right
acres.
next to the property that the town of Southampton purchased too, for the,
It's possible.
For the sewer district?
The
Yep.
river park that they're looking to do.
yep,
But so you have to be, and that's why, there was an agreement on that parcel across from the museum, and we made sure, and it wasn't easy, you know, to get that agreement with the county, to put that language in, it can be used for off-the-road parking, path to the water, so it's waterfront access to the public, and it can be used in the future for a blue-green trail. At some point, if you link these parcels together, you can make them part of a blue-green trail system. So, there's different categories then, different pots of money. So when we started having discussion with the town, you know, should it be more active or should it be more passive? You know, our feeling was that the town should kind of set the tone, because the town's the partner as far as developing it and managing it. So if the town wants something that's passive, like across the Historical Society, you want something that's safe off the road parking, you know, a simple trail, you know, somebody had interest, Audubon had interest in putting up some bird blinds. I don't know if you're familiar with how they put them up so that at different sites, so that birds don't see people, but you can observe their feeding, nesting, whatever habits they have, you know, that's sort of real passive use, you know, a little trail to the water, you can put a kayak or a paddleboard or something. Or if you wanted to take a step and do a little more active approach and have, you know, I know there's talk of bathrooms and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, there isn't any waterfront access proposed on this plan, and the waterfront access is already, there's already a parking area and waterfront access just to the east of this parcel and just to the east of the LIPA property.
It's a
So-
little, I don't know if you're familiar with that, it is access, it's a little difficult, because it's a long, like, trail down to it. This parcel's a lot different, because the parcel to the east, it's all, it's very low, it's beautiful, untouched, wetland, hardwood forest, it's really nice habitat. This is a lot different here, because it's been impacted so heavily, there's more opportunity, I think, for different kind of access.
Did you have an opportunity to look at all the paperwork that I passed out to the legislators when I appeared before the legislators, and the minutes from the hearing, and the fact that the BOA study said that before any development could occur, that all of the contamination from the duck farm would have to be removed in order to build a building, an industrial building, or housing, or anything of that nature? It's also within the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers as a scenic, property, and riverfront corridor, where in the scenic rivers, it says that anything from 250 feet from the shoreline to half a mile is under the jurisdiction of the New York State DEC for the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers Act, which is nearly impossible to build in. I mean, the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers properties that are within the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers. It's really, you know, you gotta spend a lot of money and do a lot of contamination remediation. You have to do, these properties are all owned by the same person, so if he wanted to subdivide it under the scenic rivers, he could only get 2 lots, 2 residences, and this plan shows a bathroom on the property. And, you know, I think that the EPCAL rec trail would be a perfect spot to put one of these bird watching, platforms, because we do have the grasslands there, that the DEC wants to see preserved, and it's in the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers, so the town has just tried for, it seems like 100 years, to try and get a subdivision or something to be approved there by the DEC, because it is in the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers. And like I said, it's in the BOA study area, where the BOA said that prior to anything being built, all the contamination would have to be removed. It's in the riverfront corridor zoning that says that if anything were to be built, 50% of the lot would have to be donated to the town, and that the applicant would have to build this, essentially. So I'm just curious as to how you do a point system, or how the county does a point system as to properties that are in threat of being developed versus properties that will be preserved, naturally, just through the zoning and the DEC hurdles.
Well, the rating system isn't really always based on that, and the rating system's done internally in county planning. The appraisal would be based on the value. So if you could put a hotel there, and I see hotels and big apartments going up on the river here, you know, so.
But that's
so
in the
wait, so
zoning that
the-
we changed.
But let me finish, well, exactly, so zoning can be changed, that's exactly my point. So zoning could always be changed to allow for any kind of development based on, you know, whoever wants to make that decision. So if it's preserved and you have a plan for preservation, whether it's waterfront access, I would say you should put in the possible wetland restoration, because, as an option, because then you'd have that as an option in the future. We're working with vector control to try to, because there's wetlands, of course, on the edge there, and there's other wetlands internal, because
Yeah,
it's been
all over the
impacted.
place.
So you wanna try to put that in, so someday the wetlands could be, improved, so there's no treatment for mosquitoes, and there's no habitat for mosquitoes. You'd wanna put that in the plan. But the value, so you said there's all these restrictions on
And
the
there's
land.
also notices of violation on the property
But-
because
But wait,
unsafe
but- So the
structures.
value, I wanna address your comment about the value of the property. So the value is based on current zoning and current restrictions, and there's all those wild and scenic river restrictions and all those other things that are on that site. That's how the value would be set. So we just, you know, we make an offer on parcels that are wetlands, now. There's a lot in the Mastic Shirley area, there's some in Wading River. You would consider unbuildable for anything. Some that you wouldn't even consider a parking lot on, because they're so low. But they're being preserved, because of the storm resiliency concerns, and there's concerns about if they're in private hands, what could happen in the future. But their value is very low, because the value is based on use. So it's not like 16 acres on the river, it's worth $1 million an acre, we're all done. It's based on appraisals and comps. So it's only based on what could be done there today, not speculating on, well, maybe change the zone or maybe there's another restriction, so the value go another way. It's only based on current use.
And we're currently collecting $15,000 a year in property taxes that would go away. So it's, over 10 years, that's $150,000, it's a lot of money. I mean, I can't even imagine that this property would be worth that much based on what you could build on it, but that's up to the appraisers to decide.
I'm not an appraiser, I couldn't speculate on.
But I guess
what it's
my
worth.
concern is that we can't even keep up with the parks that we have now, let alone build a new park.
I could,
Well-
that would be my concern, if I could just
Sure.
get a word in.
Sure.
I don't think anybody doesn't recognize the significance of this property when it comes to the estuary, when it comes to the wild scenic, and the fact, like you said, we have a lot of leases going on for oysters and upwellers, all that, all through the Peconic. It is a piece of property that Open Space looked at, and it's still on their list. When I sat on Open Space for 8 years, we talked about lots of properties, but this
Sure.
was certainly one that was on our radar. I think the thing that gives me a little pause is the costs, not your costs, the town costs, when it comes to legal, when it comes to planning, when it comes to engineering, when it comes to permitting with the DEC and the EPA, the invasive species and all those permits that you gotta get. And that's just administrative costs, and then you're gonna have other costs with actual work that's gonna be done, building, where they're gonna build, whether it's walkways or docks and then the perpetual upkeep of all that. That's a real cost center. I mean, I'd love to see it preserved for all the right reasons.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that collating that with some sort of a plan with the town for perpetual upkeep and maintenance. I mean, if there was a ramp or a dock or something at the end where people could perch their boat and relax a little bit or take in the views, that's one thing. But when you start with, especially with all the invasive species there, I just think, so I don't think anybody, at least I'm not opposed, I think it's a great purchase as far as preserving what we need for the estuary. I'm a little worried about the partnering of what the town will have to undertake with that whole.
So, that's up to the town, and you could do a much simpler approach than the original proposal. You could do waterfront access, I would put in the wetland restoration as something for the future, because the problem with land preservation is there's only one time to do it, and it's when you can. Because if this changes hands, the parcel's for sale and it changes hands, the new owner's gonna have different expectations. And they might not think preservation is in their best interest, and they're gonna propose something. And then, you'll all have to deal with it, and then whether it's something's built or not built, and then that's gonna be the end of it. So there's only one chance usually on these parcels to preserve them. And so this has been a resolution before the EPA committee for months, and it's been tabled. We don't have another meeting till early February. So by all means, figure out, if you want a simpler approach, safe off-the-road parking would be very simple there, because it is high ground, it's right on the road there.
Al, let me just say that any time that the county is going to help us preserve land in Riverhead, I'm very pleased and appreciative. And you make the good point that when we preserve land along the river, that helps protect our waters, which is something that we definitely wanna do. I did meet with Open Space the week before last, and the Open Space Committee is very pleased to have this land preserved and certainly in favor of it. So I just wanted to make those points.
Thank you.
Al, you mentioned different pots of money used to purchase the land. Is that based on would that be based on what we as a town decided to do with this? Whether we wanted to go to a much more significant type park or very restrictive
Yes.
passive type park?
Yes. But
Does that really affect the chance of it getting purchased by the county or
I don't
for preservation?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's just different pots of money that are used for,
And we wanna make sure at time of purchase, and I use that park in Flanders as an example of, somebody didn't think, geez, it's waterfront access.
Yeah, you
We
don't
should
want-
put
you
that
wanna-
in there, so it should be waterfront access.
You don't wanna
should be able
hamstring
to do,
yourself, right?
wetland remediation, so they don't have to treat for mosquitoes. You know, those things, they didn't think of those things.
It's also
You know?
bulkheaded and it's not in the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers and doesn't have the restrictive zoning that this piece of property has.
Well, but that sets the value, I'm talking about the public use after it's
What's
public
allowable.
property, what's allowed.
allowable.
And even the wetland restoration is important, you know, vector control is a big deal, I just saw in the news, there was 11 cases of West Nile this year. And, you know, anytime you can manipulate the wetlands to eliminate the spraying and treatment and breeding of mosquitoes, you need to put that in there on every wetland.
So who would do that work, the wetland remediation?
That is a combination of town, county, state, Peconic Estuary Program, they're all active in those sorts of, projects. So, some happen quickly and easily, and some are very complicated. The one at Indian Island has been stalled for years because of the material, they can't find a home for it. So some are easy and some are difficult, but if you put it in there, some future generation's gonna say, oh, that's great, you know, that's a problem, we get to remediate that at some point. You don't have to do it today or by, you know, sundown, it's just that it's in the plan.
So, cause it was represented to us that we can put forth a plan and we don't ever have to build it, so.
Well, I'm not sure if you don't ever have to build it is the right way, so there's an opportunity to do what you want to do. Do you have to build a trail? If you do a trail system, do you have to build all those trails? I don't know, but you can if you want to.
And that's why you keep making that correlation to the property
Right.
in Flanders, because,
Yeah.
they missed that opportunity, and that's why we need to have the plan.
Right.
And I feel like it would be foolish for us to miss this opportunity, especially when you're saying it's like a one-shot thing. I wanna see us preserving land in Riverhead, and I certainly wanna see us preserving land along the river, which is beautiful,
So if you-
regardless of the invasive species.
So, well, yeah, it is, it's a different site, you know, so.
Unique.
It's oddly unique, yeah, because it's been so impacted, but on the other hand, it's got a lot of river frontage, so, you know, think it over. You've got more than a month till, till the next, committee meeting, so you wanna come up with talk to the open space committee, come up with it.
Yeah, I don't think I wanna hamstring ourselves, like you said, I mean, you don't wanna put something that's restrictive for,
Right,
you know,
right.
50 years from now, there might be a whole new use for the property.
Exactly, in 50 years, someone's gonna say, why didn't they put it?
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
And I think that's part of the concept plan that had presented with engineering, is the fact that it's phased in. So you can do some very passive things so that people can have access on the property in a particular phase. I mean, just in the, we've seen grants that are available to do this kind of restoration and to do this kind of project come in over the past, year that certainly could access to move the project forward, and I go back to the rec trail. It was 10 years to accumulate grant money to be able to do things with that did not come out of, the general fund. So, in time, we're able to accomplish something, and like Al says, it's not overnight necessarily that things happen, but having the ability to do that. And I think one of the other things that, had come up is this parcel of the significance, and went back for the community preservation plan that was done to participate in the, CPF and the community preservation. These 4 parcels were listed in the Riverhead Towns,
Yes.
community preservation project plan. So they have been identified as an area that the town, felt was significant enough to preserve.
And that was before the master plan was adopted in 2004, which restricted the property to any development that it could occur on it, including donating 50% of the property to the town
Well, it's
and
not a
building their own
donation.
trail.
It's not a donation of 50% of the property to
An
the town.
easement,
No,
donation.
it's not an easement, it's the same as when you develop on agricultural land and they ask you to cluster the housing, so you're preserving, usually sometimes 65 to 75% of that property in the AP zone, and you cluster the housing here. It's the same on this property, where they ask you to develop only on 50% of the property and more or less cluster where you're gonna build. So it's not any different than some of our other
Actually,
zoning we
I
have.
have the
And I
exact
think this
verbiage
goes
in my
very much
office.
to Al's point, that zoning can change. and it changes the ability to build on a piece of property, where if the property is preserved, it's preserved forevermore.
Right, and for 10 years, the town worked on trying to change the zoning in that corridor, and the DEC stopped it halfway before it got this far down west. So they allowed the community river zoning to occur on Main Street up to the point where the sewers end, essentially. And then everything else beyond that is riverfront corridor zoning, which does say that 50% would have to be left as open space, and a trail would have to be developed prior to any development occurring. So,
And I think that goes right back to the point again, that, you know, as you increase your sewer capacity, the ability to develop on particular parcels of property becomes more attractive, to be able to do, because it mitigates some of the reasons for not being able to build on their parcels at this particular time.
so I really like the idea. I mean, even though the $15,000 a year in lost taxes would be spread out amongst the residents of the town, I like the idea of preserving it, but I don't like the idea of the town being required to build a park there and maintain a park there. And I am just concerned about downtown and the property that the county owns closer to downtown, where there's a piece right next to it for sale, where tires are piling up behind the building, and there's, you know, riverfront access, there's trees that are still clustered behind where the development occurs, that I think would be a perfect piece of property for the county to preserve and create a park there right across from the Henry Perkins. So I think that, and I expressed this to the legislature when I spoke to them, that I think the list that they have is from 1998, before we did our upzone and our master plan, to get a current list from all the townships as to which properties would be priority, because if we close EPCAL and we get some money, I would be thrilled to partner with the county to buy that other piece of property that's for sale. So, and I think that we would have a willing seller also. So I just think that there's other properties closer to downtown where it makes more sense to put a park in, and if this could be preserved and left as perpetual open space, and we already have a boat launch area just to the east of it, maybe 100 feet away. So those are my points.
So there's a possibility to preserve both, the one across from Henry Perkins and this also. And
we have about 4 to 6 weeks to discuss this as a board.
well, you're really as long as you want, that's the next meeting, so, you know, that's all. And one thing I didn't mention is something that, in light of sea level rise,
Which will happen.
every open space purchase that we make in any kind of wetland area, which this certainly is, there is language automatically added in that the property can be used as for any kind of storm resiliency project.
Great.
So
That's fantastic.
That's added in like automatically, because, you know, everyone's trying to address that and make sure that, again, we're not put in a box where, oh no, you could do a really important project there to protect the upland, protect the neighborhood, protect your infrastructure, but we can't because, you know, it was bought with passive money, so our hands are tied, you can't do any kind of project there. So, that's another component that would play into the preservation of this. So, you know, I'm not saying to, you know, rush into it, you have time to do this, and to figure out, you know, long-term, what your vision is, what your goal, how much access you wanna provide there.
If we went with saying, yes, we want the property, we'd love to have you guys buy it and preserve it, but we don't wanna spend or commit ourselves to $1.6 million. We wanna do the least minimal passive type use for that property that we possibly could, costing us the least amount of money. Would that weigh in as to whether the county might purchase this or not purchase this?
Oh, no, not at all. No, this is, the county, and I've been kinda haggling with the, planning department in the county for years, cause they have a master list, but it's not a comprehensive master list. And we preserve parcels all over the county that haven't been on the master list. So not just on the east end, but there's parcels all over the place that never made the list, cause there's a lot of wetland parcels throughout the county. So that doesn't really weigh into it, so.
Right, because people change their mind.
Your proposed use of it would still, it's still an important parcel because it's on the river.
Right.
So it's, you know, whatever, you know, the trail's gonna be 4 feet wide or 6 feet wide, it's not gonna make a difference.
My concern is looking town-wide, we have parks that are in disrepair. We have parks that were never completed. Veterans Park never got the lights it needed. So it just doesn't make sense to me it makes sense to me to preserve the property, don't get me wrong, 100% behind that. but then to commit ourselves to like a $1.6 million
Mm-hmm.
configuration. I know that was a concept, and I know
That's
that can
exactly
be
what it
scaled
is.
down, and that's maybe
Or
what we
phased
have
in
to
over
decide to
time.
do.
Sure.
But, I just feel it's responsibility on my part to take care of the parks that we have already, to maintain them,
Sure.
and commit money to those parks before we go out and acquiring more
Oh, sure.
that we're committing ourselves for down the road.
Of course.
But I also understand the fact that you're saying, don't sell yourself short at this point in time and say, hey, maybe 50 years from now, well, sorry, you guys didn't do that. Who was on the board? That Hubbard, damn Hubbard, that
Yeah,
guy,
why
you know.
didn't he think of that?
Right, exactly.
Just
So
saying that now,
there's a,
it's still here, so.
there's a little mix between the both that I think, and if we have time, we can discuss and maybe figure out exactly what we wanna do. But I don't think anybody, I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I think we're all in favor of preserving the property. It's just a matter of how much commitment we want from the town.
Sure, and I think that's been a philosophy of a lot of towns when it comes to open space, is preserve it when you can, and then let the next generation figure out if they wanna put what they wanna put there, you know, because then that's a conversation they could have, cause they're gonna commit the resources to doing that.
Well, that's what was nice about Sharpers Hill, because it was a very minimal
Right.
passive use with just some gravel for parking
Yes.
and the trails, and that property is forever preserved. That was a home run.
Right.
But if you don't have in the concept plan, it's my understanding, if you don't have it in the concept plan, that even next generations can't put that in there.
Right, they're gonna be limited, yeah.
They're gonna be limited, is what they're gonna do, and that was part of the point of the concept plan, was not a commitment to, and this is kind of what I was saying, it's not a commitment that you have to do it today, but if you don't have it in the concept plan, forevermore you can't do it, and it really pertains to something like the bathroom and if you wanted to have a raised boardwalk there. That's really what you couldn't do if you didn't have it in the concept plan. And that was the point of putting it in the concept plan for discussion for the town board. I mean, that's, you know, it was
Right.
kind of, you know, you shoot for the stars because you wanna be able to have it still be recreational without being an active park where you're putting ballparks or anything like that in, but still be able to enhance it to its fullest capacity, if and when at some point in time you have the money to do that. And if you didn't put it in the beginning, then it would forever stay more of a dirt path without sort of this access.
Isn't that hard to believe?
And with you have,
Go ahead.
but this is why we had Al here, cause Jody feels that if you don't put it in the plan now, that you can go back and put it in at some
It'd
point.
be very difficult, and the parcel in Flanders is the example of very difficult to go back and even put a parking lot in. Now, I just wanna address another concern you brought up, is the environmental concerns about the site. So, the county goes out and they do a phase one, which is they look around, they see if there's anything that needs to be done. And if they think there's any kind of, and this happened to a parcel across from the Henry Perkins there, they thought there was a fuel tank, so they did a whole, they actually, I don't know if you noticed, they dug a hole there, and the DEC came down and tested the soil, cause the fuel tank was taken out, I think, in the thirties. But they tested the soil, and they made sure that there was no environmental problem that needed to be remediated before the county owned it. So any kind of buildings would have to be taken down by the landowner before it's purchased. You know, any kind of, encroachments have to be addressed before the county takes title. But you know, as far as any kind of, remediation, that's all addressed in the whole preservation process. So that's not just glossed over, that's, you know, it's taken very seriously, because you don't wanna have, we're all county residents, you don't wanna have the county take something that's a liability, you know, that's gonna cost a lot to clean up. So you don't wanna put that on the taxpayer, so that's all done throughout the process.
Yeah, cause this conceptual plan is actually proposing a structure, which is contrary to what our zoning permits. It says that it would have to be gravel and it would have to be ground level. And the town engineer has come in and said that even with the 2-foot elevated catwalk, essentially, you're not gonna be able to see the river. So I guess my concern is having a structure on this property at all. Like, I wish that there was a funding source that the county could just buy it and then, you know, it be preserved, because we do have the property over here that's owned by the county, and I would be curious to see on that piece where we do have a parking lot and we do have where you can walk down to the river and you can launch, like, what the conceptual plan was for that property. Was there a bathroom proposed on that property that just hasn't been built as of
Well,
yet?
that I
Because then
don't-
maybe
I don't
we don't
know.
have to show a bathroom here.
Yeah, that, I don't know if there's a possibility of putting a restroom there or not.
That was state, wasn't it?
I think it's state.
State.
Yeah, I think that was state, that's a state launch,
That wasn't county.
right?
Well, I think
And
we're,
I'm sorry, it's a different site, because here you've got that, there it's and I walked through there, it's kind of a pristine, mature wetland there. This is a lot different, you've got the Phragmites there, and
which
it's,
is-
they might get drowned out at some point too, and they might disappear. So
Yeah, but
there's a lot that could happen there over the course of time, and it might be, you might have access there, issues there that people are gonna be very grateful for in 50 years or 100 years.
Yeah, I just know, I'm familiar with wetland remediation, I'm familiar with going before the administrative judges at the DEC, asking for permission to develop properties like this, and, you know, the Phragmites are an invasive species. Actually, as a matter of fact, the town engineer said that, you know, most of this lot is invasive species. So I know how to remediate that, and it's really done by hand, you're not bringing equipment in there. You're doing it by hand, and there's a maintenance plan that goes along with it, because you gotta get back in there every month and make sure they're not growing, and if they are, you gotta hand dig them out and get them out. So, I guess those are my concerns, is just the cost of putting a park here and then maintaining it. Because
Sure.
they're invasive species, the entire lot is invasive species.
Mhm.
So, where you clear and where you remediate, the invasive species are just gonna take over again unless you take them all away. And that's a big concern of mine, and the cost to the town to do that.
It depends on what your goal is there.
I just wanna say that I've always felt blessed to have a town that's on a river, and to have so many great waterways around us. I think that, that's something that we should all feel blessed for. And I wanna thank you for coming today, and always advocating for our town.
Yes.
I hope we can preserve
Yeah, you
this
do all right.
land. I think, it would be short-sighted of us not to put any kind of plan in place, for the long term.
Yeah, thank you, and yeah, please work on something that, you know, that
We'll have to
it's
talk
gonna,
about.
everyone's gonna be comfortable with. But that's gonna give the next generation the opportunity
Right.
to have some use out of that parcel, so, thank you.
Good.
Oh, thank you very much for
you.
coming.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry
Thank you,
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Al, thank you.
Appreciate it, Al, thank you.
Ho, 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 ho.
All right, are we okay to move on to the next?
Nah, I don't wanna.
All right, well,
We're moving anyway.
next, site plan application, Mavilla Foods Building. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
You still ain't done with this site plan yet? Well,
Give everybody a copy.
Morning.
Council, how are you?
For,
Good, how are you?
getting
Mr. DeLuca, haven't seen you in
Hi,
forever.
how are you?
Christmas. Email you that I
Four,
have,
five,
but I
four,
wasn't-
five.
He's a frequent flyer, right?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have the two of you introduce yourselves, because we are on camera, you can just stay there, cause there's,
Oh,
they can get you from any
Cameras
angle.
everywhere, behind me, they're looking at you,
This is
and
not gonna go up on the postal list, is it?
Well, no, we hope not.
could be useful someday as a missing person, and,
Jarrett Weber, Weber Law Group, counsel for, Ladies of Calverton, the applicant.
Okay,
Jim DeLuca, architect.
welcome, good morning.
So just to start out, it's been determined that this is going to be an administrative site plan with a
You
public
gotta be
hearing.
louder. I knew you were gonna
With
get
a
that.
public hearing. I understand that a resolution will be on for January 3rd to set the public hearing. So just to go over the application and the report a little bit, I will pull out this plan, in case anybody wants to take a peek.
Is this the same as this one, or?
Just the elevation
Okay.
of what we're doing.
Okay, so we received the site plan application, the application indicated the applicant wanted to install an overhead door, remove one exit door, and install 2 exit doors for a proposed office area, ice manufacturer, and bottling water in the existing building at 317 Berman Boulevard in Calverton. The site plan application had the incorrect tax map number. The application was received in April. An incomplete letter was sent later in April. A resubmission was made in September. We did have a pre-submission meeting, held with the principal of Ice Queen in April. Later meetings were held with the architect and the attorney, and/or the attorney for the project. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but at the July meeting, it was indicated that Ice Queen was no longer a prospective tenant and no interior partition changes would be proposed until the new tenant was known.
Correct.
And for the public, Karen, if you could just state where this parcel is located,
I was gonna get to that.
Okay.
So the parcel is located in the PIP zoning district out at EPCAL. The building is known as Plant 6 from when the parcel was owned by Grumman. The parcel is at the southwest corner of Berman Boulevard and the southern portion of Scott Avenue. Scott Avenue is kind of like a C. It has two intersections with Berman Boulevard, so this is the south intersection. The building, is considered, historic by the State Historic Preservation Office, and the PIP zoning district does require any exterior changes to be approved by the State Historic Preservation Office.
When was this built?
Oh, I don't know, sixties,
I believe it was the sixties.
Yeah, or before, I think.
The location, including parking areas, was previously used for the storage of, storm damaged vehicles, if everybody recollects that.
Yeah, remember.
The parcel is lot 18 in the Calverton Camelot subdivision. According to the table of lot restrictions, the lot is allowed an impervious surface of 66%. No area to remain natural is required. It's also located in the Central Pine Barrens compatible growth area. A small portion of the southern part of the parcel is in the New York State DEC Scenic Rivers area, but the work proposed is outside of there. The location where the work is proposed is the south portion of the main portion of the building.
This is
So-
this is the site here, okay, this is the south.
Mhm.
North, east, west. Realistically, what we're doing, if you look at this door, this is the existing,
We don't need to look at this,
Oh.
everybody's seen, I'm
Yeah,
gonna close
that's
this
good,
up.
yes, right.
and it's going right here, basically.
I think this other picture, if everybody,
Yeah, that's my own.
so it's just one, this is what's leaving?
We're taking this out, putting this overhead door in, and
And
two
these
exit
doors.
doors.
Okay.
That's it.
And then where is it located on the, picture?
This is the,
It might be a little easier to see it on this survey.
Yeah, put it on.
Yeah, it's gonna be here.
See it on this picture.
Yeah, the pictures are,
Board
Okay.
here.
Okay,
So you'll see when we get to the page with the pictures, a little better idea of where it's gonna be.
okay.
We did get a letter from, New York State Office of Historic Preservation that they reviewed the project, and they felt it would have no adverse impact on historic resources.
Do they need a Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers permit for this, or no?
It's not in the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers, but where they're doing the work.
On the other
Right,
side of
but-
Scott Avenue is
'cause
where it is.
Remember-
It's south, it's on the very south portion of the parcel.
Cause I
So-
remember the parcel in Tanger, even though the development was not proposed in the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers, they still had to go and get a Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers permit.
No, they actually had they were developing in the Wild Scenic portion.
Okay,
So the ARB did recommend approval of the building elevation. The project is a type 2 action with further environmental review not required. So if you look on page 3. Yes. If you look on page 3, the bottom picture, you can see the general area where the work will be done towards the left portion of that wing. And then on page 4, you can see some other views of the area. Particularly on figure 5, you can see this existing exit door. That's the general area where the work will be done.
So the door will face, Berman, the boulevard,
No.
No, it's facing
Facing
south.
lot.
okay,
River Road,
okay.
and but way far away from.
yeah. Are the cars still in the parking lot?
Plaza's gone, been gone for a
Okay.
while,
Oh, I see.
empty
I thought it was
parking
this
lot.
big thing
Because
here.
that was
It's
one of
this
the things
portion
that
here,
in
right?
the
I thought it was
original-
this portion.
No, no, no,
It's
of course,
this.
and
There's
that
the
was,
lake.
But
they
this-
kinda left
this-
under the
this
cover of the
is
night, I
this,
think
not
that's
that, right?
insurance problems
Okay.
now.
Right.
Okay.
Although I joke with, Bob that we should check the Pine Barrens, they may be hiding there. But no, Plaza's out and there are no cars whatsoever there.
Okay,
So
great.
it's virtually an empty parking lot.
Good.
This road here, this is with the, this is in their site?
No,
Mr.,
that's
is that in your?
No.
No, that's actually,
Eastern Fence owns it.
yeah, eastern part of
But
Eastern
you don't own
Fence,
that,
yeah.
and
No.
that's, okay, that's, I'm just where the red line is, okay.
So on page 5, if you look at figure 6, you'll see to the right is the area where the work was.
That's
it.
And that grassy area will be replaced with asphalt for
Right here.
access.
If you look at it, right, this area, right in here.
In this picture.
Okay.
Yes, that's part of it. And you can see, the grassy area also in the pictures on page 4. You'll see the trees that are located there.
Is that building gonna be in the way of backing a truck in there?
Well, that's why we're taking the grass out.
I did do a site visit, like I always do, that's when I took these pictures. You can see in figure 7 and figure 8, there's parking, close to the building, that, the striping is really in poor condition. You can't see the handicap symbol, there's no handicap aisles and no signage for handicap or no parking. And then there is an area over here, that's a parking area, that, is in bit of a poor condition, excuse me. The striping is faded or non-existent, there's cracks.
Can I just say, this picture here, where is that door? I'm so confused as
That's
to where
over,
we are.
that's over here,
So-
over here.
That's right here,
Oh, so the door's getting added in here,
right
The
here,
door is being added over here.
next to another bay that already exists?
exact.
Well, there's gonna be a bit of a distance between
So
them.
if you look at
So
this.
you're going further east from where this bay is?
Right, west.
Further west.
West, okay.
This is where this was rented out. That's how we can rent these out. We have to have a door for the truck, so we put a door in here about, 2 years ago for, Delfino insulation. Now this one,
So you're subdividing in there and they need their own bay
exactly,
door?
that's because no one else will rent it,
Gotcha.
they have to.
Okay,
have small
all right,
tenants.
now I get it, okay.
So in any event, this area is basically unstriped and there's cracks and leaves are getting caught in the grass and it's a bit of a mess. In any event, the use, on the application, as I said, no longer appears accurate, because they don't know who's gonna be in there, so.
It's not gonna be the ice queen anymore.
It's not gonna be the ice queen anymore, so there's not gonna be ice manufacturer and water bottling unless.
It's not gonna be the heat miser, is it?
It's the ice
So,
king.
That's too bad, cause she was proposing about, rejuvenating the old restaurant
The
that was there when
cafeteria that
Grumman
was
was
in there,
there, and, calling it the Skyline Diner, and so.
Yeah, I guess they didn't realize what was entailed with some of the things they wanted to do. Okay, so, an updated site plan application form should be submitted indicating,
There's no
No
longer ice
tenant.
queen.
right, and that's with the correct tax map number, the correct altered area. Okay, so parking calculations were initially requested due to the fact it was uncertain that there was enough parking available with all the, storm damaged cars that were on the parcel. Subsequently, they've been removed. The parking calculations were provided indicating that based on the businesses currently in the building, 99 parking stalls are required and 128 are provided, along the curb here and in this parking lot, which is the one I was discussing earlier. So basically, when I was there on the 3rd, the only portion of the parking that was being used was this portion here. But the parking calculations indicate more parking is needed. Again, the plans show, excuse me, let me get the actual plan back.
And the parking calculation is for, which it's used as
Well,
VIP
based-
doesn't have a separate parking calculation?
No, it's based on the uses in the building.
Okay,
So the plan does show handicap parking, but there are no parking handicapped aisles, which are required, the 8-foot wide handicap parking aisles, so, those would need to be shown. Also, signage for handicap stalls and no parking in the handicapped access aisles. So it was recommended the plan indicate that the parking stalls would be restriped at 90 degrees to the curb at the dimensions of 10 by 20 feet. Also that the parking area that's in poor condition be, repaired or repaved, and that it would be restriped, with 10 by 20 parking stalls. So, again, we'll just need the updated application, and fee would go up a little bit because of the increased altered area. It wasn't originally proposed that this area be paved. As far as the site plan goes, recommending that the, existing and proposed amount of impervious surface be shown on the plan. Also that the handicap curb cut that exists there for access to the building be shown. There are some items in this area where the, doors are proposed. There's a, dumpster that's not in an enclosure. There's some railings, a guardrail, so just some clarification, the dumpster should be in an enclosure.
but that dumpster is, does each business have its own dumpster, or do you,
No,
why do you do that with your tenants?
Basically, what they previously did is put the dumpster right in this section over here. What he did was, he took the dumpster and put it over here. That can be relocated back, that's not a problem. Or we can put it over here, but it makes it difficult for the truck to pick it up. Or we can put it in a parking lot and fence it in, we'd rather not do that, rather put it back over here where this is the side of another building, the side of the other building. And, just to, we're gonna asphalt this area here. I have a proposal here, I had someone go out and give us a proposal to, restripe, to correct the ramps, to clean the parking lot up, to restripe it. We're gonna change it a little, we're gonna leave these ends out, so it's not a dead-end parking lot, taking those out. And basically, at Eagle Asphalt, he's from Riverhead, and we made up some sketches that, how we're gonna redo the striping here.
Handicap.
And for the handicap, we're actually gonna put ramps in, just not leave it to one ramp. And basically, the cost to do that, this work here, to clean up the parking lot, restripe it, and do that is about $22,000, to take care of that portion of it. Minimum $22,000.
Now, if you put the dumpster back to the original place, you are going to enclose it.
Yeah, we wanna put it right over.
Is there
right-
still an
right
enclosure
over.
there, or you'll be
No,
enclosing?
it was always, that's where the dumpster was. He just moved it over here to make it more convenient.
But our
Yeah.
zoning code now requires that it be enclosed, so that would have to be enclosed.
Yeah, so, but,
So that's what I'm wondering, are you gonna end up with 2 dumpsters and 2 enclosures?
well, I can't answer that question, but I would recommend, to limit the amount of dumpsters. You don't want a whole slew of dumpsters running along here.
Or you just don't want people pulling them out and putting them in next to their bay door because it's more convenient, you
Yeah.
end up having a corral for dumpsters, and then you're having
Yeah.
dumpsters, I mean, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
you gotta accommodate your tenants, obviously.
But, you know, I'll talk to him, but we'll make some enclosures for him, but I'd rather put them here than out in the
that
parking
makes
lot
sense.
over here. It's just, and they have access to get him, cause we're gonna asphalt this, so they can pick them up and take them away easily. I mean, it's not a
Makes
problem.
What you have now isn't working, how's that?
Well, it's
It doesn't
working-
look good.
It doesn't look good, it's working for the tenant, but.
Yeah, it doesn't look good,
I
it
see.
doesn't comply with code either, so I think
But-
you need to come up with something that, especially if you're gonna have 2 different, you know, they're gonna be wheeling them in front of their bay.
Yeah, hopefully he'll get another tenant, it's very difficult to
Yeah.
get tenants there, very difficult. And, most of the building, as Karen stated, there's no cars there because there's nobody in it. There's basically 6 people or 7 people that work for Maliva, and, then the rest of the building, there's tenants in it, but there's nobody there, basically. So, that's why you only see 6 cars parked out front, because there's nobody there. It's really that simple.
So, my concern also is that when Ice Queen came in, and now Ice Queen is on the site plan, and Ice Queen is on the application, if the Ice
Right,
Queen is no longer there, then
That's
we.
why I
Informal.
asked for a new application, and
Good.
for the public hearing, I didn't call it Ice Queen, I called it
Good.
Mibula Foods
Cause
Building.
We can give
Ted
it another
Leotis,
moniker
or,
if that's not
it's
in
the
there.
owner,
all I
Ted
do is-
Leotis,
Yeah, I
so.
put, whatever the corporation or
Maliva.
LLC.
Right.
Yeah,
is.
whatever.
Latest at Calverton.
Yes, exactly,
So,
Perfect.
realistically,
So there's
that's-
no confusion.
yes.
That's, we already have the estimates. Unfortunately, we're getting into the winter, it may be very difficult to stripe it now, I might have to stripe it in the springtime.
That's what they
Cause
like it,
it's latex paint, very difficult. It may warm up in the atmosphere, but the asphalt is still cold. And if we have to do some concrete work here, we have to wait till a decent day to do the concrete work.
Well, is there plans to resurface?
No, we're just gonna,
Just clean up the cracks?
we're just
all
going
that
to
seep
clean the
sealant?
parking lot, any of the cracks, we're gonna fill them with, a seal, filler, and restripe. I mean,
Was it concrete? Was it concrete now?
Asphalt.
Was
no,
asphalt?
this is asphalt, this is concrete in here. And that's basically what he plans to do. And then when we get a tenant, then we'll worry about the inside, but the problem is, the lead time is so long to get a door installed. You know, we've been at this, I don't know, 6, 7 months now.
Right, with April was the initial
If we
application.
get a tenant, he's not gonna wait 7 months for us to get approval to put a door in.
Well, it doesn't
So we
seem,
wanna do the door.
and it doesn't seem like the things that you need to complete are that difficult for you to get in.
Well,
No.
Let me just
Yeah, go ahead.
finish, so you're aware of everything. I did submit the application to the town engineer because some drainage was proposed for the new pavement area, and he of course brought up that the application states no altered area, however, the site plan indicates removal of grass, replacement with asphalt, and he wanted more clarification on the impervious area to be added, and to clearly identify those on the plan. So, I'm guessing what he's saying, he wants to know if this is gonna be taken out as well as this, like the whole thing here, that's what I'm
Well,
guessing.
I showed the symbol, what was gonna remain, but I'll make it,
Yeah,
I'll darken it in a little darker.
just maybe provide a little more clarification on there for him. Building department had no comments, fire marshal just brought up that for any interior improvements, they need permits. It was determined a title report was not needed due to the nature of the work proposed. The only other thing was, exterior, sorry, exterior lighting. It was my understanding that, no lighting is proposed for the overhead
No, we're not
door.
gonna put any
Still
lighting.
louder, Karen.
No lighting is proposed for the overhead door.
What?
Does the other one have lighting?
The other door does have lighting, it appears to be a floodlight that's not in compliance with our town dark
That
skies.
was there prior, we didn't put the.
Also, I couldn't help but notice that there's big floodlights on the corners of the building and other lighting on the site.
That's not historical nature? Historical in nature?
Actually,
pole-mounted lighting.
it's funny you say that
I think it
because,
might be.
because when I spoke to the state, the historic preservation, I asked, why is this building preserved? It's basically a warehouse, and I tried to get it removed because it's a warehouse basically, and they said that because it's
Grumman, and it's
exact-
more than 50 years old.
Right, exactly, but they agreed with me that that's their criteria, but yes, it's basically a warehouse, so, you know, does it really need to be on that list anymore? And I can't get it removed, but they basically, that was the reason, that it was a symbol of Grumman and of the type of, I guess, warehouses at the time, so.
Yeah, but there's other, EPCAL, structures that are on that list too, Plant 7,
You can read about them
the Wells
in
Cemetery,
Wikipedia.
all that.
All the ammunition bunkers, are we really gonna, they're historic?
So typically, we would have all the lighting upgraded,
Yes.
so it's dark skies compliant.
And that's what's been done uniformly throughout the property when people have come in for site plans, is that they had to bring the lighting up to code. So
When
you
they
don't
come-
want
when they
one
come
guy
in,
saying, you
I
made
was-
me
that
do
was-
it.
I wasn't gonna go there.
The key statement is when they come in.
When they come in.
That's the key statement.
Right,
I'm sorry,
And
who,
most
what?
of them, when they come in, most of them don't come in, they just do it without permits. That's the difference. He's trying to comply.
You'll certainly have enough people, places to park.
So is there an issue with the lighting,
Well, the lighting, all lighting has to be in compliance with the dark skies code as of December
Right.
31st, 2017. So, there are large floodlights at the corner of the building, there's pole-mounted lighting that's floodlighting in the parking lot,
2017.
I'm just saying, if you're going to do it for one, you gotta do it for everybody. So either, you know, when people come in and they wanna make an exterior change to the building, we've made them upgrade the lighting, even on the existing buildings when they have a new building proposed. So, we gotta be consistent. So either we're going to eliminate this property from the requirement of dark sky lighting, which might be a good idea because it is an industrial park, A, and B, because you need security there. I mean, there's been a lot of, equipment, heavy equipment that's been stolen, coils of cable wire, coils
Copper.
of copper, so, you know, I think the lighting is important in this industrial park for the owners and for the tenants, but if you're gonna do it for one, you gotta do it for everybody and make it consistent, or,
yeah, I mean, I go by the code, it's up to the town board to change the code or the requirements if
I think
they
it's something
deem
that
that.
the town should think about.
yes.
Because it's a massive undertaking. in
And
that
it's
place.
security, it's,
Massive, and a
you know, you have
massive
cameras
expense.
outside the building that are looking at people that are approaching the
Yeah.
building, and you gotta have lights to see who's there.
I mean, these are very old buildings and the cost to renovate these buildings is
I'm saying,
massive.
they're not under the historic preservation with the lights you have?
No.
Those
Even
floodlights
historic
under,
structures.
attached to the building are not within the historic character of the building, if if it's deemed a warehouse?
I would agree with you, and that's why the historic, what's required is if you're making any changes to the exterior of the building, such as the loading gate, that's why you need permission before you do anything to the exterior. I would agree with you that technically the lighting is part of the building and certainly part of the property.
Right, but they also allowed these changes, say it didn't affect the historic character, so I don't know if they would say the lights
I
would
mean, the
affect
floodlights on the
historic
building, I mean, that's
character.
really my, not the necessarily in the parking lot, but the floodlights on the building tend to be the character of the buildings themselves.
Well, you don't know when they were installed, so they could have been installed last week. But anyway, the code is the code, so we're either gonna make buildings come up to the current code, or we're not going to make buildings come up to the current code, so.
I think I don't disagree, you know, especially in an industrial park like this with the lighting. I think that, you know, there may be able to be a provision where there's a length of time to come into compliance, to be able to get this moving forward. And then no, I know, but if we say what the dark skies compliance is, give them amount of time to come in compliance with the dark skies while we decide where we're going to apply all this. Otherwise, they either can't move forward with this, or they have to change everything. And that means they can't do anything.
I think we should do a code revision and say that in historic buildings within the PIP at EPCAL, and that were former buildings of Grumman, where there's manufacturing, if you wanna change it and say dark skies doesn't apply, then you can do that, but the time has sunset, I think they had
Right.
12 or 12 years.
But it's all of
or-
that, it becomes all of EPCAL then, and I don't know if we want that to apply in all
Well,
of
I don't
EPCAL.
know that we've really had any, problems with the code out there. I mean, we had one site, Eastern Wholesale Fence, which is going for a variance for some lighting that doesn't comply. Other projects, I've written it up about lighting that didn't comply, and
And did they comply?
Well, either they're still in the process, or they're showing that they will comply. So I don't know, it's up to the board, whatever you, feel is appropriate.
Before I would commit for the owner to do, that's a massive cost. You're talking about parking fields, buildings, for a garage door, it's a massive amount of money, and, just to clean up the one parking lot, you're talking $22,000, I mean, for a garage door.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
that would be
yeah.
something that you would go to the zoning board of appeals for, as other applicants have, and saying that for security purposes and other things, you need the big floodlights, but what I'm saying is we have to be consistent.
Yeah.
So we can't do for some and not do for
Yeah,
others.
Well, and I only repeat what I said before, is those who choose to come in for a permit. Most people do their work there without permits, basically, it's that simple.
I tend to disagree
I
with you
mean,
there, but-
I don't wanna start pointing out individuals who do it, that's not my job. But, realistically, the owner's trying to comply, we're trying to comply reasonably for a door, that's all he wants to do, and a little asphalt, and,
I have no problems with
know.
the floodlights being on the corners of the building, I'm just saying the code is the code, so you either have to get a variance for
Well-
the code, or you have to change it to meet the code, or we have to change the code. One of those three things has to happen.
well, I have to talk to the owner. I
We could
mean,
do
I wouldn't
pre-existing
commit to
on,
that.
pre-existing lighting on industrial property, historic industrial properties,
Yeah, I mean,
Is that
I
creating
go
an
by-
impasse for what we need to do right now?
the lighting is,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Because they can't move forward unless we address the lighting, because it's in our code. So we either have to say we're not paying attention to our code, or they need to get a variance, or we need to change, make the,
I mean, certainly,
would that be an accurate assumption?
there's a light over the existing door that was put in fairly recently that's not
Well, we don't know
so-
that, you're assuming that,
That what?
that we didn't, the owner didn't put any lighting in over
No,
there.
somebody did, but
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it was either done with his approval or without his approval.
Well, what are we saying fairly recently? Because again, I would assume that a tenant wouldn't just put in something, he's had the building, well, what's the definition of recent? He's had the building, I believe, since 2000 around.
Since
Well,
the building
I was
was
just
Code was
kind of
adopted.
making an assumption that since it's right over the overhead door, it might have been put in.
By the
What-
person who's going in and out of the
But
door?
I don't
There
know
was
for
an
sure.
overhead
We have no
door, there was
idea.
an
It could've
overhead
been
door
there.
there previously, all we did was, the one that was put alongside, we made it larger.
Oh, I
But there
see.
was an overhead door there, and an exit door for the previous tenant. He needed a larger door to back his truck in, so all we did was widen the door and make it higher.
And did you put the light in as part of that?
No,
That was
I-
there prior to the
we didn't
enlargement of
touch
the door.
it, I said that before, we didn't
Well,
touch it.
I mean, then
We
we
didn't touch
get
the
into,
light
when
at
was
all.
the lighting put up? Was it part of when Grumman was there? Was it
I
put
would
in
go to the zoning
after?
board of appeals.
You know,
Five hundred dollar
I don't know.
application fee,
I'll
you're there
present-
within 6
Okay.
weeks, and
I'll
they will,
present it to the owner, that's all I can,
I
I
think
can only
they would
answer
be
that at this point.
Well, a
Obliging.
$500 fee is gonna save you a lot of money if you get a variance
Well,
on
if
it.
they, and if they say, no, he's gonna change all the
$22,000.
lights on the site, he's not gonna do it.
well,
Yeah.
that's what the
For a
code
door.
currently says right now, that you
Yeah.
have to do that, so you
Well,
have,
I'll
you
leave it
know,
up to
I
him.
mean, I think the board is in agreement to look at the code.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll look at
Yeah.
the code.
So
I don't
I
wanna-
think
I just don't want
that
I don't wanna say that we're not paying attention to the code, I don't wanna ever do that.
Right.
Right.
We'll look at the code,
But-
Karen and I are both with the code revision, and we'll take a look at that.
the dark skies needs to make sense in an industrial,
I think you're
Area.
right, and Jody
There's
brings up a
nothing else
valid
close
point.
to this.
You're right, there are areas of the town where the dark skies sometimes can be more of a hindrance than anything else.
And the other thing is everybody keeps talking about the cost to replace them to be dark sky compliant. Sometimes you don't have to replace them.
Just a bulb.
And I told this to a couple
Yes,
of the
you're right.
farm stand retailers.
Yep.
For $20, you go on Amazon, you buy a shield for the floodlight.
Well, I mean,
And I'm talking about industrial, they have shields that go over existing floodlights at minimal cost.
Well, that's if you go by the code, you're talking about height, you're
Right,
talking about
that's what I was
lumens,
gonna say,
you're
height.
talking about degrees
You
Kelvin.
may
That's
not-
why-
I mean, it's
right.
not as simple
that's
as
why
just
I
changing
think
the
a
bulb,
variance
that's
will
not
be very
true.
simple.
But
No.
you don't have to go
That's
do the
not true.
full Monty in terms of complete reconstruction, but if you can take steps towards it,
Well,
including
the
the
James
shielding.
Ford Shopping Center, for instance, working on his right now, he's gotta take down every pole, gotta replace every pole, every light, those poles cost probably about $8,000 a piece that he's taken down, he's gotta put all new ones up, all new fixtures, it's not just changing the bulb.
Right,
That's
so
not
I
true.
just wanna
Did
say,
I say that, Chuck?
I didn't look
Huh?
at
I
every,
didn't say that.
Well, somebody said it.
I didn't look at every light fixture there, but I did notice the light fixtures at
Is
the
what it
corners
is.
of the building, which are not compliant as per height, obviously. And there are also floodlights. I did notice a couple of light poles in the parking area. I didn't see like a ton of lighting. But again, I wasn't looking at every single light fixture.
Right, and anything moving
Change
forward
code.
being installed would need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable, if anything new put in.
Putting the lighting aside, what was mentioned before, with, you know, we have estimates for the remedial work to the parking lot. Again, the concern was raised that we can't do the work until it gets warmer. So assuming January 3rd it gets scheduled, we have a February date, we're still March, April, by the time we can do it, would there be a possibility that with an approval that he can start work on the door?
Yeah,
Can I
you
ask
can
you
get a
prior-
conditional site plan approval,
But Jim, can I ask you a
contingent
question?
upon getting a variance or getting the lights changed.
You said how long it was
Well,
gonna
no, I'm
take?
talking,
Or getting
I'm-
the-
Let's let, Jeff,
Jim, you made a point that it was gonna take 7 months to get the door?
No, I said we've been working on this.
No, but how long is it gonna take you to get the door?
Oh, to get the, I mean, we didn't do this, process now for an anticipated tenant. If I got a tenant tomorrow, and we had to start from scratch to get all these approvals for a door, we would lose the tenant by the time we got
Right, I
approvals to
understand
put
Okay,
the
but-
door.
Okay, so
That's what I
how long
said.
is it gonna take you to order the door? Once you-
Well, now,
if you had approval today, how long would it take to get
Because the
installed?
drawings have been done, we can get the door and start working in 2-3 weeks.
Well, I mean, we do need a
But without an
revised
approval, I
plan,
could get the
and
door,
then
and what am I
No,
gonna
no,
do?
no, no,
Without a
of
doubt.
course, my concern was
What
about
they're,
this
what
time.
they're asking for is conditional approval that they can start,
Yeah.
you can start the construction of the door, what you're looking for is a temporary C of O, if you had a tenant between now and the paving.
Pardon me?
Which is
No,
in the
that's
spring.
not what he asked for, though.
Well, again, I think it just kinda dovetailed. My point was, lighting aside, whatever it may be, and the, surface remediation, the idea was a conditional approval that he can do the door, so we have it. Once we've determined the lighting, and then once were able to do it, and if a tenant came along, obviously any interior work would be subject to an application by that separate tenant, but certainly a temporary CO with regard to use of the building with the door, so it's
Sure.
kinda dovetailed.
I think then there would also have to be some sort of, bond or something put in place to make sure that the work gets completed before because the temporary CO to permanent CO, you only have 6 months.
Yeah.
Correct.
So there would have to be something put in place so that we know the work was going to be completed and we're not chasing after anybody.
You have a concern, I can see it on your face.
Where's Bill Rothar? Because, you know, I mean, how it's been done is you get a temporary CO and then you get a permanent CO after 6 months, or you come and you know, ask for an extension on the temporary CO, but, you know, there's a lot of, and code enforcement can go out and write tickets, the building department doesn't have to reissue the temporary CO. You know, you can go take them to justice court. I think that asking everybody that gets a temporary CO to bond it, whether it's landscaping, or whether it's lighting, or whether it's whatever it is a bookkeeping nightmare. And I think that, you know, you write them a ticket,
Well,
violation for not having a certificate of occupancy and occupying a
really-
building and bringing them to justice court.
Really what our code calls for, I believe, is a temporary CO is 6 months. And is there an ability for an extension of that?
We can come back to you for, I think, 2 extensions.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's 2 extensions.
Right.
So you could get, and then that's it, you're shut down.
But the question is
You're
now we have to
closed,
go
and
chasing
that's-
after
that's-
tenants
that's
or
my
not.
point.
Actually, you bring them into justice court and the judge decides whether or not they're closed.
Right, but-
So they pay a fine and they move towards remedying it if they haven't done it.
The minor
That's
thing
my
is,
point.
we have to come in for a tenant permit. We don't have a tenant, so if we put the door in and we don't have a tenant, we have to come for a tenant permit anyway. So if we don't have the work done, they don't issue the tenant permit.
I think
It's
between
really
now and
that
the hearing,
simple.
we've got some questions that need
Yes,
to be answered, but
correct.
at this point, the next step is to schedule them for the public hearing and keep this thing
Yeah.
moving.
I think get the site plan updated as Karen wanted to, get the,
Hearing scheduled.
application updated, get the hearing
Yeah,
scheduled.
that's a day's
and-
work, I mean, that's
and
nothing.
by then, you know, Karen has to put in her report that the lighting has to come into dark sky compliance. However you do that, whether it's the town board changing the code to not require it on historic buildings within the Grumman facility that existed when Grumman was there, or whether it's a variance from the zoning board, or whether it's you're bringing them into dark skies compliance, but you just said that the guy in Jamesport is complaining because he had to change all the light fixtures. So how is he gonna feel when we tell you, oh, don't worry about it, when he had to do all that work?
Well, that's a
That's
whole-
Well,
That's Hamlet Center.
He's got a summons.
It doesn't matter,
So
there was,
he's in
the
court,
Walmart
so-
shopping center came in and they wanted to leave the existing pole lighting in the parking lot, and then all new pole lighting would be dark sky compliant, and they had to go to the zoning board and get a variance.
Well, but if I may, that's why you have different zones, and because this is in the EPCAL.
Right.
You know, there
I
are,
agree.
there are, for lack of a better term, restrictions, historical and otherwise. I'm not just talking about, you know, about impervious surface. He can't the owner of the building can't expand because he's limited with regard
A lot of
to.
people have that problem.
Right.
Jen
So-
Berman scoffed it all out.
No, of course. So my point is, and at one point we had talked about, he wanted to do another building on the site and subdivide, which was a nightmare in itself, because credits and all that. So the thing is, what I would say is that understanding in the Jamesport, there are, if you're talking about a shopping center, certainly there aren't so many restrictions in other zones as there are with this zone. So I'm not saying it all equals out at the end, but everyone's under different
Right.
you know, in a different circumstance.
It's use dependent.
I'm not gonna say a busy shopping center for the public compared to an industrial park in the middle of
Well,
town, it's the same thing.
Metro Biofuels, for example.
I'm not gonna even
That
argue
was
it.
a
I'm
historic
not
building, and they
listening.
had to change the lighting on the exterior of the building to be dark skies compliant.
Right.
So,
Yeah, there's been multiple places that
Every
had to
single place
change,
that has
like
come in.
car dealerships that had very tall poles, they had to change them all out when they came in for.
And also I think some of, well,
we
I
can
think
send
it's,
it
I
to
think it's a
town.
discussion that needs to happen
It's
with
a
the
whole
board.
separate discussion.
You are
Sure is.
cited for a public hearing when?
We're gonna schedule the public hearing by resolution on the third, and I'm not positive, but I think it's February 5th. Is when
Whatever
it's
the
gonna
first
actually be
meeting is
held.
in February.
Alright, so, I think we can take up the discussion of the dark skies prior to that at one of our work sessions. And see where that ends up. I think everybody's got different opinions on it, but we can all go back, do our research, and then come and have a discussion on that.
February 5th is correct.
Sounds like a plan.
So that gives us the ability to do that before your public hearing.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I thank you for all for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Yes,
Very good.
Go give that final there, Mr. DeLuca.
What's that?
Go give that final.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I gotta get a file today. They wish I would stay here all day.
I'm sure.
Can't use us as an excuse there, right?
Do we need Dawn for the next one?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
The next item on the agenda is downtown lighting overview, which is gonna dovetail with our proposed code amendments for downtown. Last time when we met to discuss about the DC one zoning, one of the issues was, a lot of the conversation was about lighting and where that was going to be and what was going on with that, so we have asked engineering to come and just, address that issue so we can incorporate it into what we're talking about.
The lighting downtown is terrible.
No, we're working on it.
Oh, well,
Good
terrible,
morning.
terrible,
Morning.
terrible.
Still morning.
Morning, Drew. It's been an awful long time in here.
I know you did pull a blanket.
didn't I just see you here last night at like 7 o'clock? We got out of there.
And Tuesday night, and Monday night.
Yeah.
And fine word, is that?
Hey, Dawn.
All right, would you guys like to
Good morning.
lead us off?
As soon as the computer fires up, we have a
Okay.
large scale digital print.
Keep trying to get a couple of these.
Yeah,
for
I
public.
got plenty.
You can just turn around, put on the shelf. Thank you. very nice visual.
Yes, I've done one.
It's a little better in color, but we don't have a.
Well, you know, it's so hard, when everybody starts talking about the lighting, they start saying, okay, this is this, and it's kinda hard to see the comprehensive, overview, so.
Yeah, so the large white dots are, the fixtures that we're gonna be changing as part of, Dawn's grant that she got for us,
What this is CDBG or downtown?
Which
for
one are you
the-
looking at?
For the additional lights?
Lighting
that was
replace.
the CGP.
I think it's the
That was
CDBG money, yep,
yeah.
very good.
So we've already purchased the fixtures. You can see on the labels here, there's 2 test fixtures that were put up. One was put up a few years ago, and then the last one was put up about 6 weeks ago. We've got no complaints, from anybody either way, whether they're too dark or too bright, but, so,
I thought this one right in the middle of the parking lot was a test fixture of the LEDs,
Yes.
wasn't it?
I don't know if it was,
Right in the middle of the parking lot, cause that pole was changed out a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken,
so it's
and-
either one of those. There's two test fixtures right near each other.
Yeah,
I thought there were another
one
one.
right behind Joe's garage was
Yeah.
the original.
Oh, that,
Yeah, that's what
it's,
I
Original.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this other one, Jody, is the one that we just
Are
put
they
up.
all in place now, or which one's
Second,
in place?
Okay,
the 14?
Yeah, number
These are
14.
proposed.
Okay,
I
They're
think
in
it's
place
13, I
already.
think, was
We're
the,
talking about,
this one?
12.
no.
I think
no, but
12.
I think 13 was changed out a couple of years ago, the pole was changed out and LED lights were put in there.
I might have the numbers mixed around, but there are 2 fixtures that are up there.
Oh, I see.
Okay. And then the remaining ones will be, upgraded to the same exact
So,
fixture.
so the goal is to take all the lights that we have and convert them over to LED lighting. It saves, it's an energy saver that you guys have been working on for quite a
Yes.
while, as well as changing some of these poles, upgrading them to the more, new decorative poles,
Yeah,
for,
so there's 8 decorative poles that'll get upgraded as part of the grant as well. We didn't distinguish them on the map here, but they're all along the 5 dots along Peconic Avenue. And then the 3 dots along the alleyway, or the roadway, that borders Sonny's Grill.
okay.
Those were like the old pictures were
Yeah.
broken and they didn't match, so we had that funding, we said, let's do those and match it all up and make it
Now,
look
will
better.
that increase illumination that's over there from what was there, or,
In the sense that, if there's any broken bulbs,
okay?
this should make it nice and even. They're pretty much an equivalent to what's out there now, so it should be definitely brighter.
Yeah, cause there's some that were, like, the fixture was like snapped off, I think, they were like two pronged.
And I think even just the casing in front of them just
Yeah.
was,
We were getting to the point we couldn't fix them anyway, so this grant came along at a good time.
It's gonna look much better as a gateway area also.
so once the grant and the lighting is completed from what we currently have, will the lighting be completed for downtown, or are there plans to do other,
I mean, I think there's some fixtures in this
Yeah,
area
along the riverfront.
need to go.
so these ones to add additional or to replacement?
They're ugly looking old
Yeah,
things.
They're not the LED, decorative lighting that we have along Main Street and all the other, hamlets that we've been upgrading.
And just one of the things with the light bulbs that we have also, I know, in the summer and stuff, we have the 2 arms there. It's my understanding we have 2 other arms, on the bottom of those that will be used for, just banners and advertisement and, you know, for Live on 25, things like that.
Yeah, and that
To
was,
just-
we did collaboratively with Townscape, so we funded some through CDBG and they funded some through their money, which was a nice collaboration.
You're talking about on Main Street? Yeah, cause the state also asked us way back when to approach all these committees and figure out what the best lighting would be, because they were replacing the lighting on the, north side of Main Street, where they redid the sidewalk over there.
So just out of curiosity, for the banners, who will be done through bid?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the other questions that everybody had is that, and I know we've walked through this and it's always a question, but we have it was a total of 9 alleyways that we had. 10 alleyways that we had, and just how we can illuminate them so that they seem a little bit safer. I know there is some fixtures on some of the buildings, whether who owns them, who maintains them, whether there needs to be more added, whether there needs to be some sort of string light across just for some walkability to attract people to go through those areas. Just, do you guys have any some insight onto that?
Well, some of them have, as you mentioned, some of them are lit already. And there's 2 alleys, I think, that we own the lights.
Do you know which alleys are?
Well, one next to the bike aquarium,
The bike shop.
bike shop.
One with the, wrought iron.
The gateway in front,
That's
the archway, okay. And those, what lights are those? Those are the carriage lights that are in there?
They're like a hybrid of, what we call town and country.
Right, so those are the, yeah, okay, carriage lights.
Yeah.
So my question, those are, we wanna maintain those, we wanna change those, does it,
They're fine, the ones that are there already are fine as they are now.
and you think it's bright enough through there?
Yeah, it's plenty bright.
Okay.
What about the alley over by, Sneaker?
That's privately owned, so we
But
did there.
could we do string lighting, do we have places we could hook up lighting to?
No, you'd have to do sort of what we did over at, the bike shop, was to run all new, what we did there was we put a spotlight to shine into the alley, so it's pretty bright. I mean, I went there the other night, it was fairly bright for me, but if this
But it's not
complaint says-
attractive.
Yeah,
Plus you have to shoot conduit on the ground, that's what we did, the one next to the bike shop.
yeah, we'd have to put a piece of conduit on the ground. We've explored it, it's just a
Expensive.
expensive
So we
little
couldn't do
invention.
the string lighting unless it's
You'd have to get permission from the property owner if you wanted
Unless it
string
was
lights on their
our-
building.
lighting
And
that's
there
there.
has to be electric within the building, actually.
Well,
Yes.
there's electric at the end, because we have the electrical pole, we maintain the electrical pole at the end of behind the Sneaker Aquarium
south
there.
side.
Right, on the south side, so you could certainly hook to the electricity there and string up without having to run more electrical, as long as it has enough amperage there, correct?
Yeah, and we've explored shooting the conduit.
Right, the conduit has to go underground, underneath
under
the sidewalk.
But that alleyway is narrow and it's dark, and that was an alleyway that I thought would look good with the string lighting, if we could possibly do that.
Yeah, we've spoken also to the private property owner and asked him to, take a look and make sure that his building, he's got illumination on his building, well, he's got fixtures, I should say, whether they work or not,
And I would think a
We asked
property owner would be pleased that we were willing to help with the lighting.
So Jeff, I think that we need to include this into, as we're doing the DC one, codes, that if somebody does have an alleyway, that they need to provide some sort of illumination, on the alleyway or access from the town to be able to illuminate some of it. Jeff, what do you think? Yeah, for illumination in the alleyway.
Yep.
So as we're doing the DC one code, I think we need to put in there that if somebody has a side, yard on the alleyway, that they need to be able to provide some illumination into that alleyway.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a town-owned lamp right at the end of that alleyway too.
There is, but it doesn't, it's not inviting. I mean, it's basically, you look down the alleyway, you see a spotlight on the end, and you're gonna make a run to the
Right.
spotlight, it's,
I
you know.
think that could be a nice alleyway with a little bit of work.
And the one between, the Iguana building and the church,
Yeah, right.
so we just did that, it looks beautiful.
on the sidewalk.
Yeah, the sidewalk looks nice, and as far as the illumination from that, where does that come from?
Well, we have a light pole right next to
Yeah.
the church.
So we can string another spotlight, I mean, that's the best we can do. If there's poles, we can do spotlights. If you start wanting, the decorative lamps, we have to start shooting conduits
Buying more fixtures.
and buying more fixtures.
Is there, how is the light lit with the church there? That's, you have it's not on the building, right? Isn't that a light pole?
We have a light that illuminates the front of the church, which actually does probably transcend some of the walkway, but there is a pole right next to the church with a lamp on it, regular
And
lamp.
it's the churches, or it's
Well, no, it's a light pole.
It's private
The light
owned.
pole looks like it's a town-owned light.
a
from our map.
town-owned light?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the same thing with the Preston House, they put in lighting that was in.
Well, the church can actually add lighting too,
conformance
if we have to, we'll put a
Well,
light,
that's
we'll
what
put a
I'm
light on.
saying, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Talk to the trustees, I don't see, get something that could,
You could do the string lining up there, would be kinda cool, you'd have to put posts in, you know,
In the conduit underground to get to the posts,
yeah.
in order to string the lights.
When you say string lights, what exactly
yeah,
are
we,
you meaning by that?
Christmas lights.
Christmas lights, when
Christmas
Christmas is
lights?
over, take them off your tree, put them down there and use them,
Like
recycle
the,
them.
like the party lights they have
you
at
need
the.
commercial
That's what I-
outside-
I just didn't wanna
outdoor
assume
lights.
that's what I
Yeah.
thought you
Is
meant.
that what you're talking about, really?
I think so, I don't know, I'm, you know, anything would look good, I think, better than
I
dark.
think Patchogue has some string lighting and stuff.
Yeah, but when you go down the alleyway, they're like this,
Well,
and
talk to the
this,
church.
and
We may be able
this,
to put
and
some nice
this, like
decorative
scallops going down.
Post
I think
lamps all along
that,
our property, which will light that
Paper Road is different than the other alleyways, I think it's a wider alleyway, I think it's more open because you have the church in the front with the landscaping and stuff, and I think that would probably really enhance
So
that.
if we put a couple of nice pole lamps right along that,
I think that would
our
look,
property would do that whole lot,
I mean,
do
I
the whole
think
lot.
the string lighting does look really neat, but I think it requires like an engaged person or entity to be maintaining the bulbs and the string and the, because once 3 or 4 bulbs go out and they're out for
Italian
3 months,
music
and
and
it looks,
horrible.
then it looks
You-
bad.
I know,
You
I
can
think
build
you
it
have
out
to
of
think
light gauge,
about
but I
where
think
it's
it's,
not windy either.
I think it's a
True.
great idea, Catherine, and I think that we should pick an alleyway that we'd like to do that on and apply for grant money for it, and you could do it out of light gauge steel, and you could do it scalloped, going all the way down the aisle, so that you can have the posts right next to the buildings, and then you can have the scalloped lighting, but it's a light gauge deal, and then the light fixtures go on the inside of it, you could do tube steel, and then do the lights out the bottom, and
That's cool.
that would look nice. Like right across from the Suffolk Theater maybe, going into the back parking lot.
That's the one, that alleyway on the south side of the Suffolk Theater is the one that we've already,
It's pretty well lit.
we've already done what we
Yeah.
can mimic somewhere else.
Yeah.
With the hybrid town and country lights.
So it's,
Now, so
Well,
there's
thank
more,
you for that.
there's more
Money.
lights in the parking lot too, correct, I'm seeing.
Looks like they really light up
South.
Diggers, which is
Maybe
nice,
we
it's
should
really
talk
dark
about
back
how it
there.
wasn't lit back there.
Yeah, some
in
of,
the parking lot here.
Yeah.
What about back over here in this parking area
we
here?
we bought extra fixtures, we're not including them in our discussion today of upgrading them. We're waiting
Okay.
to see what happens with the rest of those buildings, cause there
Okay.
are fixtures up there. But when I went to survey the area, it seemed that those poles will come down when the building's up. And
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken, the site plan, their site plan requires them to put some lighting up, so.
Just for
Is it-
safety reasons,
They take
making
care of
sure all
itself.
the parking lots are pretty well lit.
And then in the north parking lot with the potential parking plan, I know we're, days away.
Well, we need to get the contract
Right.
from the county, but once we get that, then we would work on the bid spec for that. You guys already really have done all the work because we did it for the grant. And then we would try to get that going for spring and done for summer.
So, but with the lights that are there, are they they're in the green space there, or they're just in the concrete,
Well, some of those,
the asphalt?
looks like,
A little bit of both.
yeah,
Okay, so just have to take that into account.
the green space is going to go away there. The islands are gonna go away up there. So I guess,
Where the gazebo is not going though, correct?
No, that's Lombardi Park, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, that's far away from where we're even talking about.
Yeah.
This is more East Avenue area. That's the restriping proposal.
And that parking lot, we already upgraded all the lights, and they're all LED and ready.
Alright, so my question for everybody is, this is where we have the lights, this is where the new lights are going up. I think one of the concerns is how we can get more lighting in the alleyways, and I think we've been very successful getting lighting done with through our grants. If we can maybe now focus on some of the alleyways, on how to change them over, not only to make them brighter, but also to make them more inviting to walk through. I think so it's both decorative and for light.
The next round of downtown revitalization funding, which is what we used round 11, 13, 14, and 15 for the decorative street lighting, and then we used 16 for the parking lot upgrade. So we're gonna be coming into round 17, that application will be due in the spring of this year.
So if there's a desire to work on a comprehensive alleyway plan, cause I know the BIDMA was very kind of considering that last year, maybe talking to them again and seeing, you know, I went to the BIDMA meeting last night and discussed, you know, they discussed a little bit about it, but, you know, everybody's sort of gearing up for that next round, so
Yeah,
now
if
would
they could be the match, that would be great.
yeah, now would be the time to kind of work on that.
I mean, I think, for the board, what do you think is that as a potential for the next? I think that might be a way to go. We have the wayfaring signs that we're waiting for.
I think it's good, I think it's helpful to make our town more walkable.
Yeah, I think that once we get the wayfaring signs up that says parking this way and it's a walkable, like, we should focus on where the signs are going and focus on those alleys, because we already have the signs directing people down those alleys, and those should be the alleys that we work on for, as far as lighting.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds reasonable.
Let me know when you got my string lighting in.
Gonna have to put
I'll
we're just gonna
dance-
take you to
I'll
talk about
dance
it, they
down
have
the
string
alley.
lighting
Is this
over
the
there.
lamp you use? Was it facing downward?
It's gonna face downward, yeah.
We'll just do the whole alleyway with those umbrellas like they did for, the lights in the park with the umbrellas. The string, Catherine, with the umbrellas hanging with the lights.
Yeah,
Watching
dance
too
over
many
it.
Mary Poppins commercials.
Very exciting.
All right,
I
thank you.
love the LED lights, but I'll tell you, driving through Main Street, I do 100 times every day. At night, it's dark.
Well, this is, then that
It's
goes
dark.
back to the DC one, where we're going through for the zoning. Should we require these buildings to provide some sort of illumination off of their building, coming down onto the sidewalk there?
Always we should.
Right, and I think that's something that we haven't considered, but I think that's something that we need to add, and this way, you know, you're not just having like glaring street lights, but there's lights coming from different sources
I'd love to have
to
some
make
glaring
it.
street lights, but there's not.
They do. I mean,
You really think it's that dark?
Yeah,
Oh my
it's
God.
very dark.
I'm
But
down
this-
there
See people
every
walking the
night,
street,
and
I slam the brakes all the time, I even
I'm
see them
down
on the
there
road.
every night, and I think it's fine.
I'm down there every night too, bro.
Me too. Yeah, I think your eyes are going.
Well, you're coming out of a bar, I'm not.
But I think
How
if
do you
we,
know that?
if we have the lighting coming from both, because you know, those lights only illuminate so far out. So I think if you have the lights coming from the businesses as well as from the streetlights, I think that'll create a nice effect.
Yes,
And it'll be warm and inviting to walk down that way
My eyes
and,
could be going, you're right, but I don't think so.
Which is why we'll get to Jefferson's feasibility study as to alleyways that new buildings coming in could create with side yard setbacks and putting lighting in those alleyways.
Actually, if we put lamps in our flower beds at the church, that would do the sidewalk.
it just needs a little bit.
Ambient light, I
Yeah.
get it, yep, I get it.
All right, guys, thank you very much, appreciate this.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hi, guys.
Marty wants to say something, I don't know, Laura, you.
Hang on.
you
No,
gotta
not
decide.
anymore.
You wouldn't, trustee with the
You
church
wouldn't want
fell,
your daughter
Well, you
walking
invited
down
them to be part of the DC one discussions.
It's dark. I mean, it's.
Supervisor says no. Okay.
Okay, very good, thank you.
It's not anymore anyway. It's not both
Okay,
sides.
Jeff.
Hello again,
Hello.
DC1, yay! So last night we had a joint meeting of the Landmarks, ARB, and the Design Committee of the Downtown Revitalization Committee.
2-hour meeting.
Yeah, it was close to a 3-hour meeting.
All our downtown meetings are long.
Yep.
Oh, they're gonna get longer.
So this will be my third meeting this week, talking about DC1. Actually, fourth meeting this week, talking about DC1. I'm just gonna summarize the discussion points, because I haven't had time to really glean through everything that was discussed, but these are the subjects and kind of direction they were kind of heading. In no sequential order. One, they are very aware and cognizant of the value and devaluing of what we are proposing. If it doesn't work financially, they're not gonna come. So they're very aware of that, and Larry Oxman prepared a cost-benefit analysis that was handed out last night, so.
And I have it for, the 2 board members that didn't get it, and we can make copies for the press also.
We need to really be mindful of,
Jim, did you get this already?
I did not, unless it's on my
Catherine,
desk.
did you get this?
I got it.
really need to be mindful of that as we go forward with whatever
changes we make to the code, so that, and they're mindful of that as well. Having said that, they're also really concerned about, any sort of recommendations regarding TDRs. They understand the goal and purpose and intent, and which they believe is laudable, but it is a cost, and they believe that the primary goal of what they're looking at are the visual impacts, the height and the bulk and the mass, most importantly, the height. They don't want the TDRs to muddy the water, so to speak, so some of the members are asking that that be a separate issue and put to the side while we go forward with the design elements. The third element was, north versus south side of Main Street. There seemed to be a consensus leaning towards reducing the height on the south side from 5 to 4 stories, because they already have the river view on the river side of the buildings facing toward the river. But they also wanna keep the value of river views on the north side of Main Street, looking towards the river, and keeping that at 5 stories, so there was discussion about that.
But not 4 stories as of right on the south side.
Correct. Well, where that's gonna go in terms of the TDR component, that's still, and some members really wanna get that, they wanna address it, but they don't wanna address it as part of this, because.
So if they don't wanna address it as part of this, let's just say, take the TDR question out of it, okay? They want 3 stories or 4 stories on the south side?
They're looking at 4.
With the setbacks, once you get past the second floor and.
They're looking at building articulation, they wanna have more discussion about building articulation, their emphasis is on design. And I put the setback in there as in terms of articulation, light, air, that sort of thing, and that's where the architects really need to weigh in more than Jeff Murphy. I put it in there as a placeholder with a very minimal graphic, to which Marty Zaluski drew a big X through it. Marty? He didn't like my rendering.
We didn't come to a general consensus though,
So
we
was
had
there-
discussion,
was
but there
there-
wasn't a consensus.
There was an overall consensus, but again, I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit, they're going to have a joint memo from both ARB and Landmarks, and they're gonna, and then they'll present that to you.
Right, they're gonna draw up some recommendations.
Good.
I thought,
And
was it
Kelly
joint? I
Schlager
thought
brought
there
up a pyramid law, from, not from ground level, but from roof level of adjoining historic buildings, which I thought was a really novel and really good suggestion.
Just ease it in.
That would be,
Kelly had some really, really strong
This-
recommendations. Do you have a drawing of that, Jody?
yeah, that would be this diagram right here. So if this was a historic structure, then you would go directly across from the roof line and then start at a 45-degree angle right there, so that
I saw that
the airspace and light would be able
Right.
to still come through
Right,
this.
but they re-emphasized it.
Oh,
The fourth point was the side yard setback. I'm not sure where they're gonna end up on that, but we had a very lengthy discussion about it. Some like the idea of it, some expressed concern because of historic 0 setbacks of the buildings we have today. And that's something that you as a board need to, gonna have to grapple with, because most of the buildings today are 0-foot setbacks. Do you wanna grandfather those in if somebody comes in with a redevelopment, or are you gonna have a requirement for a side yard setback, which is gonna be a percentage basis, because we have so many undersized lots and narrow lots, you can't have just a flat 15-foot, 10-foot setback.
No.
So it's gonna be a percentage, but that's gonna be a critical part to this overall discussion in terms of, do we want them, and if so, how much?
Right.
And we don't have an answer to that for you today, but as we go forward, we're gonna have to answer that.
I mean, existing buildings, we're obviously not gonna tell them to cut 15 foot off the building to make a side yard, but you're working on the feasibility study, and we talked about percentages based on the width of the street frontage, we talked about, you know, of side yards that could be accumulated with one building on one side of the alleyway, another on the other. If one is 100 feet wide, then a 15-foot side yard setback to create an alley.
Have you seen that anywhere?
I was gonna say,
Where have you seen that?
Patchogue.
What?
Where the buildings are doing setbacks in their main downtown area.
Patchogue.
On their
Patchogue has a bunch of alleyways that go back and go up to the
Pre-existing.
to the theater and.
pre-existing.
pre-existing alleyways, right? Have they created any new alleyways
Yeah,
that way?
in New Village, absolutely.
Again, this is something that
I don't know.
they didn't have an answer for today. I put it as a placeholder because I understand that that is a really important element in terms of
It is,
walkability and design.
My concern is that, you know, I understand design, but you certainly don't wanna, you certainly want your alleyways and your access to the river to be designed, not haphazardly done with every building you put up, I don't know.
I agree with you, Jim,
I agree
totally.
on that.
We almost have to have a master plan, so to speak, of the number of, and distance between alleys, the number of alleys, and the purpose of the alleys.
Right.
And as my discussion to you last week, we have some alleys that are 4 feet wide, and they go up to 15 feet wide. But 10 feet is the normal, is pretty much the typical pedestrian width of alleys that we have in the downtown today.
So the building across the street from the Suffolk Theater, for example, if somebody came in and said that they wanted to knock down that building and they wanted to build a new building, a 15-foot side yard setback may be appropriate there based on the width of the building and to open up that space so that you have a clear view down to the river.
But those are, across from the Suffolk Theater are three separate buildings, right? So if you built 3 buildings and they each had to have a 15-yard setback,
I'm not saying that, I'm saying if they
So
took the
I'm not
3
sure.
buildings and made one building,
well, then that would be a discussion
Right,
for when
so-
you're going through planning, you would, you know, talk to whoever was doing that, you would say, you know, we want some walkability there. But if you do the 15-yard setback, then you're, even if they took all 3 buildings, then now you're asking to do a 45-foot setback.
no, Lori, you're mistaking me, because but Jeff, I think you understand what it is that I'm trying to do, so he'll come
Well, that's
back
what I'm trying to get
with
clear
a
on.
feasibility study on it. No, I wouldn't say do 3 15-foot alleyways going down, where I was saying where it's conducive, so if you're buying 3 buildings and you have more than 100 feet of frontage, then 15% of that should be a sidewalk, and we would pick the side of the building that the sidewalk would go on. And you could either say you can do it or you can't, but with 0 lot lines,
So a
when you
guideline.
can go from property line to property line and build a building right now in DC one, you would take the chance that if it's more than 100 feet of frontage on Main Street, that you could have 15 feet that would be created for an alleyway on either side.
And it might be next to an existing side street already,
Right.
and you could add on to it to provide a little bit more breathing room, so to speak, for a nicer walkway down.
I don't disagree that it would look nice, I'm just saying the way that we have to be very careful about the way that we're asking.
We don't want
for-
15, 15, 15.
No.
Right,
Nobody-
or
I think
even,
nobody's saying
or
that.
even if somebody says, okay, I have 3 lots, now it's 45 feet. You can combine them for
Yeah, we're not
45 feet,
talking-
I
we're
mean,
not talking- I don't
you know,
think we're
because,
talking about that
and
either.
someone, that's,
I think we're talking, to have a really nice alley, and we have the 2 examples of that, which I showed. One was next to the taco sushi place, a restaurant,
And between 20 and 30
so
West
wouldn't
Main.
you be better off then if you, over a certain percentage, if it's not pre-existing, then you're 80% lot coverage, and then you can get what you want out of it, and have who's ever designing it be able to have some ability and flexibility to design it, in an
Yep.
appropriate way for wherever the building is.
Okay,
and
but-
context
So-
is the big thing, is
In context,
That's,
in terms of what you're proposing in relationship to what's there.
right.
Which takes us to the,
Well, you're gonna cantilever the second story and all that stuff.
third and fourth.
okay,
But, we have a requirement in site plan that 20% of the property has to be in, a buffer or vegetation, so if they say, well, we
don't-
need the building.
No, there's not, that's not
that's,
DC1.
that's getting to my next element, the pond.
It's not-
Yes,
not code
so
now.
what they do sometimes is they say, okay, we wanna do the 20% on the side yard, or we wanna do the 20% in the rear, or we wanna do the 20% in the front. So unless you specify what the purpose and intent of that is, then you're not gonna get what you want. So you need to define the purpose and intent in saying that the purpose and intent of the 80% lot coverage is so that where available,
do
you
that
can have
anywhere.
the pops. I know we don't, but while we're changing the zoning, it's something to consider.
Yeah, and that gets us to the next point, is I originally called it impervious, and that was never my intent. My intent, when I did my first memo, was really to call the POP, the privately owned public space. ARB landmarks, and the subcommittee loved that idea, and it's gotta be flexible though. Whether it's provided on-site, off-site, or have the developer pay into a fund, dedicated fund that would go towards improvements of the downtown, Riverwalk, or for providing green space in the downtown, or some other public improvement adjoining the river. That's what I meant by the 20%, and they love that idea,
Yeah.
so.
So the 20% would get you full build out? If you paid into POP, you get 20% full build out?
For example, if you just figured out that if you have a really small lot, and 80% really is too constraining, you can take that 20% of what you would normally reduce your footprint by, you take that 20%, and you put a cash in payment in lieu of that.
That's what they talked about.
so, and then, and maybe a dedicated fund towards public
Yeah.
purpose. Jim, you're raising,
I
Has
just,
concerns.
I sit on the side table that I own a piece of property, and now I gotta pay you to use it.
And if you bought a piece of property that's 100% built out already, you'd be exempt from that, I'm assuming.
say again?
If you have a piece of property that you own with
Right.
100% build out on it
Yep.
already, then you're exempt from the 20%.
Unless you came in to do something dramatically different.
But let's just say you're gonna just build up from, you're gonna add
Just
to
go
that.
pros straight up,
Then you would do payment in lieu of.
right.
But they already have they're not changing the building on the property. They're already at 100%, I think they should be grandfathered in.
Well, there's a question that you need to
I mean,
address.
because if you're buying a building that's already, we don't wanna encourage people to take down the buildings that are currently there. So in order to keep the historical buildings that are there and to add on to them, that one of the benefits of that would, that you wouldn't have to do that 20% of the pop. It doesn't negate you from doing either recreation fees or whatever that become with residential housing, but it would allow you, it would encourage you to keep the structure that is already there that we wanna maintain.
There's a discussion point.
You know,
right
I
there.
mean, I think.
How many vacant buildings do we have in the DC one? 'Cause that would apply to.
Shelley Gordon owns 14?
He owns
Well, it would
13. Shelley owns 13 properties.
13.
It would, if you have I mean, it encourages what we have there. I mean, obviously, if the building is in a great amount of disrepair or doesn't, I mean, these larger, it's not going to protect these larger buildings really.
That's what
Really,
I'm
what it's gonna work with is the smaller buildings, because to have somebody buy one of these smaller buildings there and then say you have to pay us 20% of your first floor, that's gonna really make it cost prohibitive.
So,
I mean, you're knocking
Okay,
off 20%
so
of their
I agree
first
with you,
floor.
no requirement for POP on existing buildings that they're gonna leave the first and second floor,
If they
and
don't
they're
take
gonna
down
go
the
up third and
structure,
fourth.
if
Yeah.
they're not removing the structure.
and I think that's what the landmarks was also kind
Love
of leaning towards, because they wanna preserve the existing fabric of what's there.
Yes,
Which takes us into the last point, which was a very interesting discussion. I have about 5 pages of proposed new design guidelines, and just a couple of words that really stuck out in their mind, where I put no modern or contemporary architecture.
encourage
Well, there's other
contextual
way,
planning.
they're looking for properties that fit.
Contextually, so I think we can change the language, so I put that in there, I deliberately put that language in there to flesh the issue out.
Right,
Um,
to encourage, not discourage.
Which was good, and we also talked about materials too. It matters what materials you put into.
and
it.
the way
I
put-
would love to see the landmarks and architectural review, sort of, I know they have the design guideline book that they had.
Yep.
But I would love to see actually some visual of what it is that they mean, so that we can have conversation about something we're looking at, because otherwise I think it becomes very, very difficult for contextually compatible, or whatever the language is that's being used. I think we need to kind of see what
Right.
that means.
And there was, and they brought that up, they said that they, had talked about working on guidelines, especially ARB was discussing that, and that they needed to.
Especially having drawings and diagrams within the
Right.
code, because trying to articulate a design element is very difficult, because it becomes subject to interpretation.
Just even some pictures they like of
And
other
we-
buildings.
And we had some discussion that we had last week about that some people coming in would like a little more guidance
Guidance,
as to
yep.
what we are looking for.
I know that's what
And
they
that's
did in
where
Pat's
those
office.
guidelines would come into play.
And the one thing
think
I
they'd
put
be
out to them,
helpful.
I said, you take a look at buildings that we like today.
Mhm.
They've been there for a long time, and what's the first word that comes? Sustainability, they've sustained the time. I said, you look at the buildings that we're constructing today and the construction methods that we're using today, those buildings are not gonna be here in 50 years. You got these ephes with the styrofoam with a faux finish on top of it, they'll last 10, 20 years maybe, and they're gonna have to be completely replaced.
Yep.
But are they gonna become historic as some element, or are we gonna be known as architecture of temporary nature that's gonna have to be constantly upgraded? That longevity that we love and encourage today is evaporating with the
Right.
modern building
But,
techniques.
but I think that then that's where, you know,
Take a look at your
the
church.
guidelines change from what you expect, so that when developers come in, they, you know, I mean, I think they know what it is that we're looking for,
Right.
they're very clear, they can run their numbers, they can do what they need
Mm-hmm.
to do before they make a decision of what they're gonna do, but, you know, we can't say, okay, maybe, okay, but you do it, you don't do it,
Right.
it doesn't work.
It's gotta be applied across the board.
So maybe you can share some of those pictures that you brought last night,
Yep.
where it showed a historic structure with a modern,
Yep.
built behind it, and then you had the historic structure where they used the same materials and it just looked like
Blandness.
out of place.
Yep, so, it was a very healthy discussion, one that we're gonna bring back to you again.
Historical Society, you're talking
Landmarks and the ARB.
ARB,
I know, but
and
did you
and
see
then one of the
some kind of Historical
subcommittees of
Society
them.
with the addition they put on that?
Yeah,
You could do it, and I have examples where, I live in Sag Harbor, so you talk about modern additions to existing. There are really good examples of what's been done, and there's an example you just look at and go, what the heck were they thinking?
like,
So,
like.
Well, we don't wanna
building
be the place where, what the heck were you thinking?
right,
Okay?
But just to recap, it was about 15 people last night.
Yeah, it was-
Between Landmarks, ARB, and then the subcommittee that's working on planning and design from the downtown committee. Within that group, there were probably 5 architects and a couple of planners. Everybody, you know, it was a healthy discussion. We tried to look at all aspects. And one thing that I liked, there were a couple of people who had worked on, you know, revitalization efforts going back many years.
Right.
And saw some, you know, recurring themes that came up, and talked about what went wrong before, which I find helpful. To look at what went wrong and why they weren't able to revitalize. They brought up 2 or 3 topics of what went wrong in years past, which I thought was helpful. And there was some talk about the park, like you talked about the pop, and behind the stores, everybody seems to consistently bring up how much they would like public space in the back there. Some sort of public space area, but then of course we'd have to relocate the parking, we'd have to figure out the parking, which is one of our concerns. And someone else brought up, the shops at Eastwind and how those are little shops and how that's a very
Small.
popular area.
They're like small
And
shops.
how people like the
It's a nice
small
area, it's a
shops
really
and
nice
how
area.
that would work in the downtown area, having the small shops.
Right.
And then, as always, the topic comes up of the empty buildings, and, you know, that whole issue is very frustrating to many people in town.
I think we all agree that those shops are just, those stores are oversized. You know, they're
Oversized,
they're
in
vacant
bad
because they're
condition.
For downtown
oversized.
shopping, yes.
Yeah, so that is what we need to encourage to change. So how do we bring in people that are
You need a
willing
runaway
to,
bulldozers. what you need.
or the owners there are willing to divide up those shops so that they're marketable?
And it comes up every time, the frustration people have with some owners that, you know, have been sitting on those properties for a long time and not moving forward with them.
Well, when you think about it, you know, when they were bringing the, horse and carriages and goods and supplies out from the city out to the East End and back and forth, you know, Riverhead was the only place to stop. So those big stores made a lot of sense, but now as
Not that old.
Southold has their own little
They're not
business.
that old.
Some of them are 60 years old, some of them are
There
early.
was no horse and carriages
There was
60 years
cars,
ago.
Yeah, there were, Jim, you can look at the old pictures and see horse and
60
carriages
years ago?
parked in the streets.
How old are you?
No,
60.
Jim, the Riverhead
Yeah,
Savings
how old
Bank,
They had
when was
cars
that
when I
built?
was born, I'm 58, I don't know.
When was the Chase Building built? I think that I saw like 18-something on the side of that building where Riverhead Savings Bank was, and Stark Confectionary's been there since 1911. So,
Right.
yeah, they had horse and carriage back then, and when they were
Well,
coming
that's
out from the
60.
city,
Took
bringing,
100.
I am, but I'm saying that Riverhead was the only place to shop. It was the place where people came to get a bite to eat on their way out, and the big stores, you know, they made sense. But when people were coming here, then
I think that was during the
Southold-
50s that they had the.
Southold built a lot of little stores recently over the last 20 years. So the need to come to Riverhead to do all your shopping wasn't there.
58 happened to Main Street, that's the only
So
thing that
that's
happened to Main
what
Street. The
came
only
up.
thing that happened to Main
That's
Street
what-
was 58.
But
People said,
I also think
people said 58 took away from
Of
downtown.
course.
It's shopping trends and all that
We're not the, we're not the only downtown that suffered, and and a lot of other
Right.
downtowns didn't have 58.
Right.
So there was a trend where big box stores came in, people stopped going to their downtown to do their
Well, they
their
wanted
major
one-stop shopping, and now
Right,
people
so-
are doing computer shopping, so
But-
10
but-
years from now, even those stores on 58 are gonna be obsolete.
But in doing that, we know that bringing people to live in the downtown area, bringing people to work in the downtown area, to shop in the, and I think, you know, it's been successful in many other places. And I think it can be successful here, but we need to set the stage so that it can be, so.
Smaller shops is the way to go, I
And
get
another
it.
thing, another thing that was brought up last night
But
was
town
the,
acquisition is another one.
another thing that was brought up last night is the historic district, the newly created historic district downtown to the north of Main Street. So if you're going to propose 5-story buildings over there, then you can be sure that those historic structures are coming down, and buildings that are being built on Main Street right now would replace those historic structures of significance. So there was discussion about that also.
Yeah, you want that.
And back to the alleyways,
There's
it always
beautiful buildings over
comes
there.
up about, you know, the wider alleyways, and how in other cities, the alleyways are what draw people in, and
Yep.
where the shops are, and that the shops should be facing in,
Into
into
the
the
alleyways.
alleyway.
Our two
For
successful
new
ones have that.
construction, that we should.
Absolutely.
But you have to go to somewhere, you know, to go down an alleyway with shops, it has to lead on both sides to somewhere. I think that's the part of the element we're missing. I know that there's been some discussion, and the Community Development Agency has reached out to I think it's the American Institute of Architects, about coming in to look at some of the design that we can do in that back portion over there, because, I mean, you know, all of this needs to be in the context that it floods back in the back parking lot there. And if we ignore that when we're doing all of this, we're missing a big part of, something that we have to address for our downtown area.
By the way, that's the elephant in the room.
Well, the new buildings that are being built are required by state law to provide elevation certificates and to build above the flood line by 2 feet minimum. You can go greater, but you have to go at least 2 feet, and mechanicals are still permitted underneath buildings where parking garages are and things of that nature, where you put the heating and the air conditioning units and things like that, cause they don't care, I guess, if that floods, but the property owner probably does, but the state doesn't, as long as it's, you know, not habitable space. But you have to build at a certain elevation that's above the floodplain. So that's the threat on the south side, is if there aren't enough incentives to rehabilitate those places. And the threat to the south side is that those buildings will come down so that people can build to get above the floodplain elevation. So keeping that in mind.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's why I think that it is above our expertise level as the board, to kind of figure that out, and I think that that's why we really need to have somebody who specializes in this.
Well, especially
Come,
if you go-
come to take a look and give us viable solutions, so that when developers do come and look at this, that we say, you know, we understand this is a concern, but these are, what the plans to mitigate this
Well,
are
actually,
going
the
forward.
2 spots they're doing now in McDermott, that's 11 feet, you know, to ground, and then you go down to Sunny's, it's only 6 feet, so.
Well, I mean, that building in the back's gonna be 74 feet tall, 75.5 feet tall, 74.5 feet tall. If you go past the hospital now, what's the hospital at, 80 feet? The structure they're putting in the top of the hospital?
No, it's not that high.
Okay, so if you look at that, that's what we're looking for at downtown with the 5-story building right now. 74 feet in the back. It's huge.
Well, we'll see when the
Well,
river.
I walk past the Preston House, and I work next door.
We're gonna see what it's gonna look like
It's not offensive, I
next
mean,
year.
it doesn't
But it's
seem
not a
offensive.
huge building.
with
It's not a
Gallows
huge
building.
building, you're right, it's not a huge building.
Next year,
It's only a
coming
week away.
right a week away.
The next step in all this is we really need to have these meetings with the property owners and architects, so.
Yeah, so I saw the
Well,
letter that was generated to rally the crowd,
we
yeah.
have said, and I'll say it again, and I'll reiterate it again, and I know you were at the meeting where I said it, Jeff.
Yep.
Was that we were going to work on this to get it done probably mid-January, and then we will start having our community forums mid-January and schedule them. So I think that we've been quite clear that we are engaging the whole community, you know, to have the developers come speak, to have the community come speak, to have, you know, different concerns, the bid, you know, Landmarks, I think, wants to come, Architectural Review Board
IDA,
wants to come, IDA wants to,
spoken to
you know,
us.
so I think there's a lot of, the civics want to come and speak, so I
Sure.
think there's a lot of
Bring 'em all
people, that want to come speak, so I think that will be, set up those meetings and invite everybody to come, and we can, you know, listen to what the
Way to
community has
be.
to say.
That's it.
If anybody has any
just-
questions,
Just to let you
know where to find
know, Jeff,
I'm sorry?
just to let you know, we do have property owners on the downtown revitalization committee, and I will be inviting some of the property owners to come and address the committee at the
What property
January,
owner you got?
Can you, Catherine,
for
can
part
you,
of the January 16th meeting.
Yeah, I've
can
asked
you
them to come
please
call you. for the
provide us
dinner.
with a list as to who the members are of the Downtown Revitalization Committee and what their participation is, whether they're a tenant, whether they're an owner, whether they're
We
Well,
can
it
send
was-
you the,
by the
we can,
way,
we can
it
send you the
was-
resolution, it's in the
Yeah, it was in the
resolution.
resolution, which was,
and then
I
also
feel
the
like it was May
subcommittees.
16th.
Were they
And then
named?
also the subcommittees, who the subcommittees are made up of and what they're looking at, that would be helpful also. We don't have that,
I'm happy to.
great.
Karen could put it all on the website, right?
Yeah, I am gonna put the committees
think
on
Karen
the
does your
names on the
website.
website.
How many
Okay.
subcommittees are there?
There are three. There's problem solving, long-range planning, and marketing. And the subcommittees meet separately, and then they come to the larger meeting and report out. And what's kind of cool is in each subcommittee, there are people that have expertise in that area. Problem solving committee, obviously, we talked about some of the problems
That's
today.
gonna grow.
They'll be working on.
The problems are the solving.
No,
The solving.
I don't think there's any problem that's not insurmountable. I really don't, cause I think everyone wants the best for downtown, cause it is what it is.
And we're talking about it, that's how you
Right,
solve things.
exactly,
And
so.
I always think it's good to get some new perspective on things, to get some new people involved and get some new perspective on things.
Did you have the market analysis? I didn't get that. Did that get copied?
Yeah,
Now, who did the market analysis?
Larry Axman did, but there's
Oh, well, then I
some,
question the whole damn thing.
well, it's really based
Thank
on
you.
facts.
Jim's gonna look at it.
Forgetting
It's based
it.
on facts and it's based on
What is
numbers
this
of
here?
what the property is sold for, what the
Current
cost,
zone
the cost of development is not
This
in
is
there though.
proposed zone
And we have an
80%,
accountant on the committee that's gonna look at
so
it.
it's all wrong, all the numbers are wrong.
I mean, look, that is, lot coverage right now is 100%.
I know, so it's not, the numbers aren't right.
What numbers aren't right?
Oh, the lot coverage, you have the existing lot
Current
coverage.
zoning says 80%.
It's actually 100%. EC one.
I have some problems with some of these numbers.
Yes, that's what it says.
400% on current and 160 at Bruce
But what
proposed.
you have is lot coverage is 80%.
You said lot coverage was based on 80% at the current.
Floor area ratio,
Where's Drew?
Yeah.
But she's,
Okay,
But we're not talking about
I gave
verbiage.
Yeah, mine
Next.
doesn't fit on my desk.
just the numbers aren't correct.
Still out there?
all right, we are going to move on, thank you very
See if
much, Jeff.
Drew's still there.
We're going to move
See
on
if Drew is still
to
there.
the Suffolk Recycling Meeting recap follow-up.
Oh, Lord.
John, is Drew still here?
I thought I saw him in the hallway.
there
they are.
80%.
And they're back.
Lot coverage is 80%, lot coverage, 80%. Current zoning, proposed zoning, lot coverage, 80%.
No, I understand, it's just that, I think it throws the numbers off a little bit.
Well, it does for pre-existing buildings if they're at 100%.
Sure.
Well, I think this was talking about,
No, it's a start, yeah.
That's on your page anyway, so.
But he also did it on floors permitted too. Yes,
as of, he says current and proposed.
right, but even if you did, you still need it on 4 floors, because I don't think any of us are at 2 floors. I think all of us are at 4 floors, nobody's at 2.
Yeah, but this is, okay,
And do
so,
one with TDRs and one without TDRs.
that's, the TDRs are at the bottom.
Right, but he did this whole proposed code for the comparison on 2 floors, we're at 4 floors.
As of right,
No,
New
not as,
proposed code.
not as of right, we haven't determined anything, I think we're all in agreement that we're at 4 floors.
but
Whether-
as of
whether-
right, you can only do 2, and then with TDRs, you could do 3 and 4.
There's no as of right or not as of right, all of that's in discussion at this point. The floors, I don't think any of us are in disagreement
Okay.
at 4
I don't
floors.
think anything's written.
This is
Correct.
as per the draft code is today, so this is as per the draft code is today, where it says that only 2 floors are permitted, and then you can go up to a third and a fourth with TDRs.
Oh, well, that's,
So
yeah,
this
that's-
is based on
But
the
so
draft
he's doing
code.
this on 2 floors only.
He's based that on
On the draft
oh,
code.
yeah,
Right, which
all
has changed already.
Disregard,
We're
'cause
talking
that's-
about his document, so.
Larry, do you
Okay,
wanna come
can
up
we
for a
move-
second, if you want, sorry?
And it wasn't based on 2 floors, it was based on an FAR of
Right,
1.6.
I get it, but you base it on something that's still a working project, that's,
Absolutely.
yeah, so.
Based on what the current draft
It was
is.
just
Yeah.
addressing what was.
So, I'm just, so this is
It's
based
not a
on
working document,
2,
it's not even a
you're
draft.
building on 80% build out, 2 floors?
No, this is based on the current zoning, which allows for an FAR of 400%. And the memo by Jeff Murphy, and whether you're going to take it or not, was, that memo talked about, each floor having a .8. So, and 2 floors without having to buy TDRs. So that's how this table was.
And it's
Okay.
.8 at 80%, not 100%. So you didn't do 100% lot coverage on any of the buildings?
So, it's based on the
I'm just
draft
asking,
code.
I'm
It
just,
was- Yes.
I'm just asking, that's all.
It was
So,
just based on this memo.
so this
Alright, well, we're
calculation
sorry
is
that
on,
you
it's on
got
an
that
80%, on an 80% lot coverage, 2 floors.
'Cause that's not gonna stay there.
It's an FAR of
With
.16.
Okay,
So,
okay.
it's easier to, apples and apples,
Yes,
just talk
okay.
about FAR.
So every
Okay.
week when we change the proposal, you'll redo it?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay.
cause it's
It's
gonna
in
change
Excel.
every week, every time we change a.
It's in Excel, I can easily change numbers.
Good,
Okay.
because
So-
next week's proposal won't look anything like that,
Right.
and I guarantee the one after that won't look anything like that.
So, yeah, so,
But it's,
again,
it's helpful to have this each stage of the way, I think.
this
I
was
think
clearly just to address this,
Okay, perfect,
so.
thank you, appreciate the work, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
You're the best, I don't know where you find your time, though.
Okay, so now Suffolk Recycling Meeting Recap Follow-up.
Yes, so last week you were all handed a copy of the, Suffolk County Recycles and asked to make any recommendations or suggestions as to what you wanted to see changed as far as this particular, sticker is concerned. So, some of the questions that I had were the plastic bottles, show the lids on the bottles, are the lids, are on the tops recyclable or not? And then another question that I had was the glass, how it says do not put glass bottles or jars in your recycle. Our Carter is still taking glass.
Thank God.
So, and then I thought that it was important for the towns that aren't taking glass, that the county break out and specify whether it's colored glass or whether it's clear glass, because there's different recycling for colored glass or clear glass, and as to what you can reuse. And then,
What are the other towns, are they having bins that you can bring the glass to, or they're just not
Brookhaven
taking them out?
has
They
it.
have bins, right, local bin
Brookhaven
people
has
can go to.
but then, once you throw the glass in, it breaks, so
Right.
then,
Oh,
you
good
know,
Lord.
what good is that?
That's half the fun of throwing the glass out.
So, and then, so some of these things are not applicable to us, in my opinion, because we are still taking glass at the curb.
Right.
So, they would have to say, not Town of Riverhead,
Mhm.
or what have you. So do not place medical waste, needles, catheters, or lancets into the recycling containers. We know that, because we know that we have depositories for those. So I think that it's important to specify how to dispose of those items rather than just throwing them in the trash. So I know, my daughter, who I give injections to daily, when she goes for her monthly infusions, I take the needles and I bring them to the hospital and they dispose of them. So I think it's important to not only say what you can and can't recycle, but where you can dispose of them if they have it on here as, do not do it.
Sometimes these things, when you have too much information on it, it gets overlooked, and I know for the medical stuff, usually when you get syringes or anything like that, not only from the doctor's offices, but from the pharmacy and everywhere you get your supplies from, do give you all of that information when you
No.
didn't get a disposal container
Nope.
to know to do anything?
Nope, I get a 3-month supply of syringes that comes from the National Institute of Health, and there's no explanation as to how to dispose of them.
When I got my syringes, they actually gave me a Sharps container.
Yeah,
to keep
usually they
them
do.
in, And a place I can call to mail it, but that was me.
That's usually what they do, I'm
But do they
surprised.
give you, so you call them when the disposal container is full, and then what do you do with the disposal container?
They sent me a box of shipping it.
Really?
for medical waste.
Yeah, usually, cause medical waste can't go, it's contaminated, it's biohazard. So normally the disposal
Cause
for
they didn't do that
biohazard is much
when I
different.
was on Emerald, they didn't do that, they gave me a container, but they didn't tell me to send it back to them.
Yep, they sent it to me, in fact, they called me and said, hey, you got those things? You know, they didn't send them back right away. They're like mad at me.
Okay. So, anybody think of anything else on here that,
Police department will take,
I mean, do we like
That's
the
a
Suffolk
convention.
Recycles to put on our bins in Riverhead?
they get consideration.
Yeah, they just have to address the glass, cause like you said, we're still accepting it, so somehow that's gotta be,
There was going to be something on there, I thought you said.
Do we
That you
actually
have to
see
check with your
recycling going
town's
where we have to
website or
separate our
something.
colored glass and all that?
Mark Carter takes it all
I know
the.
Carter does, but now China's not buying American recyclables because of contaminations on it.
We'll have to wait and see, I don't think that has been, I haven't heard that
I
one way
thought
or
they just
another.
crushed all the glass anyway, but I guess they can only crush clear glass and then they,
I don't know about that, I haven't
Well,
seen
clear
any of
glass
that.
is the recyclable, because that, like, if you get a dark beer bottle, or you get a dark
Rolling Rock, yeah.
medicine bottle, or you get,
I don't-
and you start mixing that up with the clear glass, then it's contaminated. So, I don't know, our recycling discussions are just beginning.
Oh, it's
Do
so
you
hard
two
to
have
do right
anything to
next
add to
to
this?
No, just the part about the glass, otherwise it still looks fine.
So the town is okay with passing out the stickers, cause I think the county's gonna try and apply for grant funding for this, so that, and then they can disperse them to all the townships, which is why all the town seals are at the bottom. So then,
Do you need a letter, do we need a
We should have a
to
resolution.
say that we're doing, okay.
yeah,
yeah, we'll support that, then
Yeah.
we'll, our stickers will just go, we'll just put a nameplate over something.
So we're okay with that, so we'll get a reso together that we're in support of
Yep.
this and to please include us with that.
Thank you, yes, you gave it to me last week.
All right, any other
Back to work again if I-
things? Thank you guys very much.
gentlemen?
You're the best.
All right, so
Now, if you fall off your
can I have
bicycle, do you have to recycle?
I'd like to come out, to go into executive session for items, personnel, matters surrounding the transfer of accrued time,
No way.
contractual negotiations with Civil Service Employees Association Local 1000, AFS, CME, AFL, CIO, matters surrounding changing counsel for litigation, Riverhead United Methodist Church with the town of Riverhead, Riverhead Central School District, Town of Riverhead, Culinary Arts Riverhead, and Suffolk IDA negotiations.
First, I wanna say happy holidays to anyone who's watching in Riverhead, and, we look forward to seeing you in the new year, 'cause I think we don't
Again, to
have
the,
it
yeah.
Yes.
until the
So
new year.
there's no work session,
So have a great
next,
holiday, Riverhead.
no work session next
Yes.
Thursday.
No way.
Merry Christmas and Happy New
Enjoy
Year.
your family.
Ditto,
Jim, did you
ditto.
wanna
Yes.
sing?
Yes, and, you know, if you got any extra gifts, you can drop them off, I moved the motion to go into exec.
So were we bad?
He's not well.
Oh,